At
Domaine de
42,
la
Elena Sterling had
Romanée-Conti,
become an expert at being
1985
invisible.
vintage.
In a world that
It
worships
appears
youth,
to be in order.
middle age is
You
a
may open it.
superpower no one
Bien
wants.
sûr, on veut
The
des
morning her
grandes
mother
compagnies
died,
technologiques
Elena
et
learned what
des
true invisibility
des
meant.
célébrations.
Not the kind she had cultivated over 3 decades in professional kitchens, where being a woman already made you half transparent. This was the erasure of legacy, the silencing of stories that mattered. Her mother, Margaret Hayes, had spent 40 years as a food writer, documenting the lives of restaurant workers across America. The invisible ones, she called them, the women who fed the nation while starving for recognition. 6 months after the funeral, Elena stood in her office on the 71st floor of the Sterling Tower, overlooking Manhattan like a queen surveying a kingdom she no longer recognized. The city glittered below, each light a restaurant, each restaurant a battlefield where women fought daily to be seen. Her own restaurant, Constellation, occupied the penthouse of this very building. She had designed every inch of it, the lighting that made guests feel like stars, the acoustics that turned conversation into symphony, the menu that proved a woman could master French technique without sacrificing her soul. But something had broken. She could feel it the way you feel a tooth beginning to crack, subtle, inevitable, painful. The stack of complaint letters sat on her desk like an indictment. Elena reached for the top one, her hand steady despite the tremor of recognition she felt reading the words. The handwriting belonged to someone older. The loops careful, the pressure inconsistent. Arthritis, maybe. Or just the weight of years. I am 52 years old. I have worked in fine dining for 30 years. Your manager called me grandma in front of guests. I am not anyone's grandmother. I am a professional server. But that is all anyone sees. An old woman. Elena set the letter down, picked up another. The young girls get the window tables, the good tips, the respect. We older women are put in the back, in the shadows, where no one has to look at us. Is this what you wanted when you built Constellation? Another. I was told I looked tired. I am 48 years old. I am not tired. I am 48. Elena closed her eyes. Behind her lids, she saw herself at 28, standing in a kitchen in Paris. The cordon bleu, her dream school, her nightmare semester. She had been the only woman in her advanced techniques class, one of 3 in the entire program that year. The head chef, Laurent, was legendary, brilliant, cruel in the way only French chefs are permitted to be, as if cruelty were itself a technique to be mastered. He had stood over her station, watching her plate a dish she had spent 3 days perfecting: saffron-infused fennel broth, butter-poached lobster, microgreens she had grown herself in the small apartment she shared with 2 other students. The dish was flawless. She knew it was flawless. Laurent picked up his plate, studied it. His face revealed nothing, which in itself was revelation. He set it down. 6 out of 10, he said, loud enough for the entire class to hear. Adequate for housewife cooking. The next student presented an identical dish. A young man from Lyon, 22 years old, confident in the way only men who have never been questioned can be confident. Laurent tasted it, nodded. 9 out of 10. Exceptional work, Christophe. This is professional caliber. Elena had stood there, her face burning, understanding for the first time that excellence would never be enough, that her gender was a handicap no amount of skill could overcome, that she was fighting a war where the rules changed every time she learned to win. She had finished the program, top of her class technically, but the damage was done. For 7 years afterward, every time she plated a dish, she heard Laurent's voice, adequate for housewife cooking. As if being a wife, being a woman, being anything other than male was itself a failure. That wound had driven her to build Constellation, to prove she could create something so perfect, so untouchable, that no one could ever question her competence again. But in building perfection, she had built a prison. The intercom on her desk buzzed. Marcus, her husband, his voice warm even through the speaker. You still up there? Reading letters, she said. The complaint letters? Yes. A pause. Marcus knew her well enough to hear what she was not saying, that these letters were not just complaints. They were mirrors. Come home, he said. Whatever it is, it can wait until morning. But it could not wait. It had already waited too long. Elena gathered the letters, 47 of them, and placed them in her bag. She turned off the lights in her office and took the private elevator down to the parking garage. The car service was waiting. Marcus preferred she not drive when she was thinking too hard. He said she drove like she cooked, with absolute focus, and no awareness of anyone else on the road. He meant it as a compliment. She heard it as confirmation that she had always been alone, even when surrounded by people. At home, their penthouse in Tribeca, Marcus was waiting with wine and concern. He had been her partner for 12 years, her husband for 8, a tech billionaire who had made his fortune building systems that connected people. He understood architecture, the invisible structures that held societies together. He understood her. "Show me," he said. She spread the letters across their dining table like tarot cards. 47 women, ranging in age from 38 to 61, all describing the same experience: being erased, being dismissed, being treated as if their age were a disease, their experience a liability. Marcus read in silence. When he looked up, his face held the expression she had fallen in love with. Not pity, not anger, just witnessing. "You built this," he said quietly. "You designed Constellation to be perfect, but you hired David Chen to manage it, and David built his own kingdom inside yours." David Chen, 41 years old, ambitious, efficient, obsessed with Michelin stars the way some men are obsessed with sports statistics. She had hired him because he was the best general manager in New York. She had trusted him because she was too busy being a chef to watch how he treated her staff. "I need to see it," Elena said. "Not from up here, from inside." "You want to fire him. I want to understand him. Understand what I created that allowed this to happen." Marcus studied her face. "You are thinking about going undercover." It was not a question. He knew her too well. "My mother spent 40 years documenting restaurant workers. She died before she could finish. I found her journals, Marcus, hundreds of interviews with women no one ever saw. She was writing a book, The Invisible Ones, The Women Who Feed America. And you want to finish it." "I want to live it." The idea had come to her while reading her mother's journals. Her mother had been an observer, a documenter, but Elena was a chef. She knew how to inhabit a role completely. She knew how to disappear into the background. She had been doing it her entire career. "If I go undercover," she said, "I can see what they see, feel what they feel, and then I can fix it, really fix it. Not just fire David and hire someone else who will do the same thing." Marcus reached across the table, took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady. "You know this will be hard, not just physically, emotionally. You will have to watch your own creation betray your values. You will have to stay silent while people treat you as if you are worthless." "I know. And you still want to do it?" Elena thought about the letters. 47 women who had trusted her enough to complain, which meant hundreds more who had simply left. Who had decided that fine dining, that Constellation, that she, Elena Sterling, was just another place where older women went to disappear. "I have to," she said, "for them, for my mother, for myself." Marcus nodded. He understood. He always understood. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the bathroom of a midtown hotel, cutting her hair. She had always worn it long, past her shoulders. A vanity she allowed herself. Proof that even in her 40s, she could still claim some version of youth. But long hair took time, care, the kind of maintenance that required money and leisure, neither of which an entry-level server possessed. She cut it to shoulder length, simple, easy to pull back, professional without being precious. Each snip of the scissors felt like an amputation, like cutting away not just hair, but identity. When she was done, she studied her reflection. Without the long hair, her face looked different, older, the lines around her eyes more visible. The gray at her temples no longer hidden by strategic highlighting. She looked, she realized, like what she was. A 42-year-old woman. Not young, not old, just invisible. She dyed the gray. Not because she wanted to, but because women her age who worked service jobs could not afford $70 highlights every 6 weeks. Box dye from the drugstore. Dark brown. It covered the silver but left her hair dull, lifeless. Another layer of invisibility. The clothes came next. Her usual wardrobe was designer, custom tailored, the kind of pieces that whispered wealth even when trying to look casual. She bought new clothes from Target, black pants that fit poorly at the waist, white button-up shirts in polyester blend, shoes from Payless, the kind that would make her feet ache after an 8-hour shift. She stood in the hotel bathroom dressed in her new uniform and felt something shift inside her. A lightness, a freedom. The clothes were ugly, uncomfortable, but they were also armor. In these clothes, no one would see Elena Sterling, celebrated chef, wife of a billionaire. They would see Amy Chen, 42-year-old woman trying to make rent. The name had been Marcus's idea. Amy Chen, common enough to be forgettable, Asian enough to suggest immigrant hustle, the kind of woman who would take any job without complaint. It felt like a lie. It was a lie, but it was also, Elena was beginning to understand, a truth. Amy Chen was who Elena Sterling would have been if she had not been born to a middle-class family in Connecticut, if she had not had parents who encouraged her culinary dreams, if she had not met Marcus at exactly the right moment when she was brilliant and broke and ready to build an empire. She had submitted her application to Constellation under the name Amy Chen, 42 years old, 20 years of restaurant experience, looking for full-time work. She had been called for an interview within a day. Now sitting across from David Chen in the restaurant's back office, Elena watched her general manager assess her like livestock. "You are older," David said, not bothering with small talk. 42, Elena confirmed. "Is that a problem, Depends. Can you keep up? We run a tight ship here. Fine dining is not for people who need a lot of breaks." The insult was casual, reflexive, as if age and incapacity were synonyms. Elena felt a hot flush of anger, forced it down. This was what she had come to see. This was the truth of what she had built. "I can keep up," she said quietly. David studied her resume. She had kept most of it truthful, changing only the restaurant names and removing anything too distinctive. 20 years of experience, knowledge of French technique, fluent in wine service. It was an impressive resume for an entry-level position. "You are overqualified," David said. "Why are you applying here?" Elena had prepared for this question. She let her voice drop, let a hint of embarrassment creep in. "My last position ended badly. I need a fresh start." David's eyes sharpened. "Ended how?" "The owner's son thought I was too friendly. I was not. He became insistent. I complained. His father did not believe me." It was a story she had heard from too many women to count. The casualness with which powerful men destroyed careers to protect their sons. David nodded, satisfied. He believed it because men like David always believed that women invited their own destruction. "Well," he said, "we do not tolerate that kind of behavior here. Professional environment only. Can you start Monday?" "Yes." "Good. Training starts at 10. Do not be late. In this industry, late is the same as fired." Elena walked out of the office and into the restaurant itself. It was before service hours, the dining room empty and echoing. She had designed this space 5 years ago, pouring everything she knew about beauty and function into its creation. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, the custom light fixtures from Milan, the tables handmade in Vermont, each one a work of art. She had built this to be perfect, and it was perfect, perfectly beautiful, perfectly cold, perfectly designed to make guests feel like gods and staff feel like ghosts. A woman was polishing silverware at the service station. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She moved with efficiency, her hands quick and sure. When she looked up and saw Elena, her face softened into a professional smile. "Can I help you?" "I just got hired," Elena said. "I start Monday." The woman's smile changed, became genuine. "Welcome, I am Rachel Martinez. I am the sommelier and shift captain." She extended her hand. Elena shook it, noting the strength of Rachel's grip, the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. "Amy," Elena said. "Amy Chen." "First fine dining job, Amy?" "No, but first job here." Rachel's eyes assessed her, kind but thorough. "Then let me tell you the most important thing. David Chen runs a tight ship. He expects perfection. Do not give him a reason to notice you. Invisible is good. Invisible is safe." The word hung in the air between them. Invisible. As if it were a virtue, something to aspire to rather than a violence to resist. "Understood," Elena said. Rachel returned to her silverware. Elena walked toward the kitchen, the heart of the restaurant she had designed. Through the service window, she could see the line. Stainless steel gleaming, mise en place perfectly arranged. The kitchen of her dreams, running like a machine, and standing in the center of it, a man she had never seen before. Late 30s, muscular build, the kind of intensity in his movements that suggested military training. He was prepping vegetables with knife work so precise it looked like meditation. "That is James," Rachel said, appearing at Elena's shoulder. "Line cook, he is former Marine, PTSD. Cooking helps him, he says, gives him control when the world feels out of control." Elena watched James work, saw the focus in his face, the way his hands moved with absolute certainty. A man using precision to hold himself together. She understood that intimately. "David hired him?" Elena asked. "6 months ago. James is brilliant, but David rides him hard, says James is too slow, too cautious. Does not understand that James is not slow. James is surviving." There was something in Rachel's voice, a protectiveness, a recognition of shared struggle. "You look out for him," Elena said. Rachel met her eyes. "I look out for all of us. Someone has to." Over the next 3 weeks, Elena learned what it meant to be invisible. She learned that David assigned sections based on appearance and age. The young servers, women in their 20s with smooth skin and easy smiles, got the prime tables. The window seats where light poured in like benediction. The VIP tables where celebrities and executives competed to prove their wealth. These were the tables with the best tips, the highest bills, the most prestige. The older servers, women like Margaret Rodriguez, 56 years old and 30 years in the industry, got the back sections. The corners where lighting was dim and guests were already disappointed by the view. The tables near the kitchen doors where the magic was revealed as mere mechanics. The tables where tips were small and complaints were large. Elena got the back sections. Of course she did. At 42, she was old by the standards David had set. Past her prime, past the age where youth could compensate for any flaw. She watched Margaret work. The woman moved like water, fluid and precise. She knew the menu better than David did, could pair wine with food in ways that elevated both, had a memory for regular guests that bordered on supernatural. But none of it mattered. Margaret was invisible. Her gray hair, her lines, her age had erased her expertise. One night, during a particularly brutal dinner rush, Elena witnessed something that made her hands shake with rage. An elderly man at one of Margaret's tables, a regular guest who came every month, called her over to order dessert. "Thank you, grandmother," he said when she delivered his crème brûlée. Very sweet. His tone was condescending, patronizing, as if Margaret were a kindly old woman playing at having a profession rather than a master of her craft. Margaret's face remained neutral, professional, but Elena saw it. The tiny flinch, the way her shoulders curved inward just slightly, as if trying to take up less space. In the break room after service, Elena found Margaret crying quietly in the corner. She approached slowly, carefully. "Are you okay?" Margaret wiped her eyes, embarrassed to be caught in this moment of weakness. "I am fine, just tired." "He called you grandmother." "They all do, eventually." Margaret's voice was bitter. "I am not anyone's grandmother. I do not even have children. But that is all they see when they look at me. An old woman, someone's grandmother, not a professional, not someone with 3 decades of expertise, just old." Elena sat down beside her, wanted desperately to reveal herself, to tell Margaret that this would change, that she would make it change. But she could not yet. "I see you," Elena said quietly. "You are excellent at your job." Margaret laughed, the sound wet and broken. "Thank you, Amy. But excellent does not matter when you are invisible." Elena learned other truths in those 3 weeks. She learned that David docked pay for minor infractions. A glass broken, a plate dropped, a complaint from any guest regardless of validity. These deductions came straight from paychecks, often without explanation. It was illegal, but David did it anyway, counting on the fact that most servers could not afford to complain, to hire lawyers, to fight back. She learned that flexible scheduling was a myth. Rachel had 2 daughters, teenagers, who needed their mother at specific times for specific reasons. Doctor appointments, school conferences, the ordinary demands of parenting. David denied every request for schedule changes, told Rachel that if she could not commit fully to Constellation, perhaps she should work somewhere less demanding. Rachel worked anyway, came in on her daughter's birthdays, missed parent-teacher conferences, let her mother, who was 70 and dealing with her own health issues, pick up the slack. Because she needed this job, because she was good at this job, because David had made sure she knew she was replaceable. Elena learned that the young hostess, Sophia Chen, no relation to David, was brilliant. 22 years old, first-generation Asian American, working her way through Columbia University. She wanted to be a chef, dreamed of owning her own restaurant someday. But her parents wanted her to be a doctor. Safe, respectable, profitable. Sophia worked at Constellation to pay tuition and to learn the industry from inside. She was hungry for knowledge the way Elena had been at that age, desperate to prove herself worthy of dreams that felt too big for her life. But David had promoted Sophia to featured hostess not because of her competence, because she was young, pretty, the kind of face guests wanted to see when they arrived. Asian, but not too Asian. Feminine, but not threatening. Everything David thought a successful restaurant needed in its public face. Sophia knew why she had been promoted, felt guilty about it, tried to share her tips with Margaret, who had trained her, who had taught her everything she knew about grace under pressure. Margaret refused. "You earned it," she said. "Do not apologize for taking opportunities. Just remember who helped you get there." Elena watched these interactions and felt her heart break and rebuild itself stronger. She had thought she was building a temple to excellence. Instead, she had created a hierarchy of worth, where youth was currency and age was poverty. The complaint letters made sense now, every single one. She texted Marcus late one night, after a shift where David had screamed at James for being too slow, where a guest had snapped his fingers at Margaret as if she were a dog, where Sophia had cried in the bathroom because her parents had called to ask again when she was going to quit this silly restaurant job and focus on her MCATs. "I understand now," she wrote. "I see it." His response came immediately. "What do you need?" "Time. I need to see her. Victoria Harrington." Victoria Harrington. The name hung in the restaurant like a curse. She was the most feared food critic in New York, perhaps in America. Her reviews in the Times could make or destroy a restaurant overnight. She was known for her brutal honesty, her impossibly high standards, her complete unwillingness to accept anything less than perfection. She was also, Elena had learned from whispered conversations in the break room, particularly cruel to women, especially older women. Margaret had served her once, 10 years ago at a different restaurant. Victoria had written in her review that the server looked tired, as if age had dulled not just her appearance, but her competence. Margaret had been 46 at the time. The restaurant, afraid of Victoria's power, had moved Margaret to lunch shifts only. Less prestigious, lower tips, a gentle push toward retirement. Rachel had never served Victoria, but knew women who had. The stories were consistent. Victoria was harsh with everyone, but she saved her special cruelty for women past a certain age, as if aging were itself a professional failure. And now Victoria Harrington had made a reservation at Constellation. Table 12, the best table in the house, in 3 days. David called an emergency staff meeting. "Listen up," he said, his voice sharp with anxiety. "Victoria Harrington is coming. This is not a drill. This is the review that will make or break our Michelin-starred application." He pulled up Victoria's photo on the projector. A woman in her mid-50s, silver hair pulled into a severe bun, ice blue eyes that seemed to assess and judge in the same glance. She wore a blood-red suit in the photo, power dressed to intimidate. "She is brutal," David continued, "especially to servers who do not meet her standards, especially to female servers, especially to older female servers." His eyes landed on Margaret. "Margaret, you are off that night. I cannot risk her reviewing your section." Margaret's face showed nothing, but Elena saw her hands clench, saw the humiliation of being benched for her own protection, the insult of being too old to serve the most important guest of the year. "I will take table 12, Elena heard herself say. David turned to her. "You? Amy, you have been here 3 weeks. You will mess this up. Then you lose a nobody server, less liability, like you said." The logic was David's own. He could not argue with it. Elena saw him calculate the odds. A new server, expendable, someone who could be sacrificed if Victoria became cruel, someone whose destruction would not matter. "Fine," David said, "but if you screw this up, you are done. Not just fired, blacklisted. I will make sure you never work in the city again." Elena nodded. Inside, she was calm. She had faced down investors, critics, celebrity chefs. She had built an empire from nothing. Victoria Harrington did not scare her. But what Victoria represented did. the way she had weaponized her power against other women, the way she had internalized every terrible thing men said about aging women and made it her truth. Victoria was what Elena feared becoming. A woman so afraid of her own invisibility that she made everyone else disappear first. Rachel found her after the meeting. "Amy, why did you volunteer for this? Victoria will destroy you." "Maybe," Elena said. "Or maybe I will learn something." "Learn what? How to be humiliated in public?" Elena met Rachel's eyes. How to survive it, how to fight back, how to make it mean something. Rachel studied her face. "You are not what you seem, are you?" "None of us are." The night before Victoria's reservation, Elena could not sleep. She lay in bed next to Marcus, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Her mother's death, the letters, the decision to go undercover, the 3 weeks of watching her own creation betray her values, the understanding that perfection without humanity was just another kind of violence. Marcus woke, sensing her restlessness. "Second thoughts?" "No, first thoughts, real thoughts." "Tell me." Elena turned to face him. "I built Constellation to prove I was worthy, to prove that Laurent was wrong, that being a woman did not make me less than. But in trying to prove my worth, I created a system that tells other women they are worthless. I became what I hated." "You did not know." "I should have known. I should have looked. I should have cared enough to see." Marcus reached for her hand. "And now you do see. So what happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow, I let her break me. I let Victoria Harrington do her worst. And then I show her what happens when invisible women refuse to stay hidden. You know I will be there if you need me." "I know, but Marcus, I need to do this myself first. I need to prove I can stand up without you saving me. Not because I do not love you, because I need to know I can." He kissed her forehead. "Code Red still stands. You text me, I come. But only as a witness, not as a savior." "Only as a witness," she agreed. She had revised their emergency protocol. Code Red Constellation no longer meant Marcus should rush in to rescue her. It meant he should come to bear witness to her rescuing herself, to see her power, not grant it. The next morning, Elena dressed in her Amy Chen uniform. Black pants, white shirt, sensible shoes. She pulled her hair back into a simple ponytail. No makeup beyond basic professionalism. She looked in the mirror and saw a 42-year-old woman. Invisible, ordinary, unremarkable, perfect. At the restaurant, the atmosphere was electric with tension. David had run everyone through Victoria's preferences 6 times, the exact water temperature she preferred, the specific stemware for sparkling versus still, the precise timing of course delivery. He had turned service into a military operation, as if precision could prevent cruelty. Elena knew better. Cruelty did not need an excuse. It only needed permission. Margaret pulled her aside one last time. "Let me teach you the rules, how Victoria tests, her triggers, her patterns." They spent an hour together, 2 women separated by 14 years and a secret, sharing the accumulated wisdom of surviving powerful people who wanted to see them fail. "Be invisible," Margaret said finally. That is what she wants from women our age. To be invisible, to serve without being seen, to be perfect without being present. Elena looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had been told for years that her greatest professional achievement would be to disappear. "What if I do not want to be invisible?" Elena asked. Margaret smiled sadly. "Then she will destroy you. But God, Amy, wouldn't it feel good to try?" At 6 in the evening, Elena took her position at the service station. Table 12 was set perfectly. Every detail calibrated for judgment. The entire restaurant held its breath. The front door opened. Victoria Harrington walked in like a queen entering conquered territory. Blood-red coat, the same one from the photo, but somehow more intimidating in person. Silver hair styled with the kind of precision that suggested both control and fear of losing it. Her face was beautiful in the way powerful women are beautiful, not through softness, but through the absolute refusal to apologize for taking up space. She was accompanied by a man in his 50s, clearly uncomfortable, checking his watch repeatedly. Robert Walsh. Elena recognized him. City councilman. Someone with power of his own, reduced to accessory by Victoria's presence. Sophia greeted them at the door. Elena watched the interaction, saw Sophia's nervousness, saw Victoria's assessment, quick and cutting, saw the moment Victoria decided Sophia was acceptable. young enough to be decorative, old enough to be competent, the perfect servant. They were led to table 12, the best view in the house, the best table in New York, the table Elena had designed to make guests feel like they owned the sky. Elena picked up 2 menus and a bottle of Voss water, the specific brand Victoria demanded. She had already checked the temperature 3 times. Perfect. She approached the table, saw Victoria scrolling through her phone, deliberately making the server wait. A power play. Obvious, effective. Elena stood perfectly still, counted to 45 in her head, did not shift her weight, did not clear her throat, did not apologize for existing. Finally, Victoria looked up. Her eyes scanned Elena from shoes to hair. The assessment was surgical, brutal, designed to find flaws and make them visible. "And you are?" Victoria asked, her voice cold enough to frost glass. "My name is Amy Chen, madam. I will be your server this evening." Victoria's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. "How old are you, Amy Chen?" The question hung in the air, inappropriate, invasive, designed to humiliate. Elena met her eyes, steady, unflinching. 42, madam. 42, and still doing this. How quaint. How quaint. Robert Walsh shifted uncomfortably. "Victoria, please." "Please what, Robert? I am simply making conversation. Am I not allowed to notice that our server is old enough to be doing something more with her life?" Elena felt the familiar heat of humiliation, the shame that came not from the truth of being 42, but from the implication that being 42 and serving tables was failure, that age without achievement was a crime, that women had expiration dates. But she had felt this before, in Paris, in boardrooms, in her own restaurant without knowing it. She had survived it then. She would survive it now. "Is there anything specific you would like this evening, madam?" Elena asked, her voice level. "Water first. Try not to spill it. I know coordination decreases with age." Elena poured the water. Not a drop touched the tablecloth. She had been pouring water since she was 16 years old. 26 years of muscle memory. Age had not diminished her skill. It had perfected it. Victoria sipped, made a face. "It is warm. I can tell from the lack of condensation. Take it away, bring me a new bottle. And this time bring ice, in a silver bucket, with silver tongs. You do have those, or are we at that level of establishment?" Of course, madam, I will return immediately." Elena walked back to the service station. Rachel was there, her face tight with concern. "She's already starting," Rachel whispered. "I know." "Amy, you do not have to take this. We can ask David to reassign." Elena looked at her. This woman who had been taking abuse for years, who had learned that survival meant submission, who was trying to protect someone she barely knew, because protecting each other was all they had. "I am not going to ask David for anything," Elena said quietly. "I am going to serve her, perfectly, and I am going to show her what happens when you underestimate invisible women." Rachel studied her face. "You are different. I cannot explain it, but you are different. We all are, we just forget." Elena returned to table 12 with the ice bucket, the new bottle, the silver tongs. She opened the bottle using the technique she had learned in sommelier training, poured a small amount for Victoria to taste, did everything with the precision of a surgeon and the grace of a dancer. Victoria tasted it, nodded curtly. "Acceptable. Now the menu. I assume you can at least read it to me." Elena opened the leather-bound menu, the one she had designed herself. The weight of it in her hands was familiar, comforting. She had chosen this exact shade of burgundy, had specified the font, a custom typeface that was elegant without being pretentious, had written every word of every description, agonizing over whether to say butter poached or gently poached in butter. "For appetizers this evening," Elena began, her voice steady, "we are offering a deconstructed bouillabaisse. Saffron-infused fennel broth, poured tableside over poached lobster, scallop, and snapper, finished with a rouille." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "Deconstructed, how very millennial. As if taking something apart and calling it art makes it meaningful." Robert Walsh cleared his throat. "Victoria, the menu sounds lovely." "Robert, you think everything sounds lovely. That is why you are a politician and not a critic. You mistake politeness for taste." She turned her attention back to Elena. "The bouillabaisse, who created this dish?" Elena felt her heart rate increase. This was dangerous territory. "The executive chef, madame." "And who is that? Some young man fresh from culinary school thinking he has reinvented French cuisine?" The irony was almost painful. Elena had to physically stop herself from responding the way she wanted to, from saying, I created it, I am the chef, and I am a woman, not a man, and I am 42, not young. Instead, she said, the chef has extensive training in French technique, cordon bleu. Victoria's eyes sharpened. Cordon bleu? Well, at least someone here has proper credentials. Though I notice you avoid using pronouns. Is this chef a woman? Yes, madam. How predictable. Female chefs always try too hard. All that emotion and insecurity, manifesting as unnecessary complications on a plate. Give me the Osetra caviar instead, imperial grade, with blinis, and make sure they are room temperature. I do not want warm blinis disrupting the row temperature. That is a mistake only amateurs make. Elena knew with absolute certainty that warm blinis were the traditional correct service, that the slight warmth enhanced the caviar, brought out its nutty complexity, that Victoria was testing her, setting up an impossible choice. Serve it correctly and be called wrong. Serve it incorrectly and actually be wrong. Of course, madame, room temperature blinis. She returned to the service station where Rachel was waiting with concern written across her face. She is setting traps, Rachel whispered. She asked for room temperature blinis. I know, but that is wrong. The chef will know it is wrong. You will get in trouble. I will handle it. Elena went to the kitchen, found James at his station, focused and calm despite the pressure. She placed the order, watched his eyebrows raise slightly at the room temperature specification. She requested it specifically, Elena said. James nodded. The guest is always right, even when they are wrong. While the appetizer was being prepared, Elena observed the dining room. Constellation was full tonight, every table occupied by people who had waited months for a reservation, people who paid $300 per person before wine, people who expected perfection. And in the middle of it all, Victoria Harrington, sitting like a queen holding court. She had power here, the power to make or break careers with a few words, the power to decide which restaurants thrived and which ones closed, the power to determine who was worthy and who was invisible. Elena had built this restaurant to claim power for herself. But in doing so, she had created a system where power was still distributed unfairly, where youth and beauty mattered more than skill, where women like Margaret were invisible despite their excellence, where women like herself could only be seen if they achieved the impossible. The caviar came up, 3 ounces of imperial Osetra, each pearl perfect and glistening, $900 of fish eggs, served on a mother-of-pearl platter with ice, cream fresh, and the blinis Victoria had requested. Room temperature? Wrong, but as requested. Elena carried the platter with the reverence it deserved. This was not just caviar. It was a test, a trap, a moment that would define the evening. She placed it in front of Victoria, arranged the accompaniments precisely, stepped back. Victoria stared at the platter, did not move, did not touch anything, just stared. Is there a problem, madam? Elena asked. Victoria's voice when she spoke was quiet, dangerous. The blinis, they are room temperature. Yes, madam, as you requested. I requested them because I assumed you would have the common sense to tell me it was wrong, to explain that warm blinis are traditional, to show some basic knowledge of your profession. The trap had sprung. Elena had walked into it with her eyes open. But instead, Victoria continued, her voice rising, you simply did what you were told, like a robot, like someone with no understanding of food, no passion for the craft. You are 42 years old, and you still do not know the basics of fine dining service. Robert Walsh put down his fork. Victoria, this is excessive. She did exactly what you asked. She did exactly what a poorly trained server does. She followed orders without thinking. This is why women fail in this industry, Robert. Too compliant, too eager to please, not enough backbone to stand up and say no, that is wrong. Elena felt the heat rising in her chest, the familiar anger of being trapped in a double bind. Do what you are told and be called mindless. Question authority and be called difficult. Succeed and be called lucky. Fail and be called incompetent. There was no winning. There had never been winning, only surviving. I apologize, madam. Shall I have the kitchen prepare warm blinis? Victoria leaned back in her chair. And wait another 15 minutes while the caviar oxidizes? You have already ruined it. Take it away. As Elena reached for the platter, she saw it in Victoria's eyes. The calculation, the decision, the moment before the violence. And so it began, the evening that would change everything, the night Elena Sterling would stop being invisible and start being unforgettable. She did not know it yet, but the caviar was coming, not to be eaten, to be weaponized, the moment of violence that would crack open the world and let the light pour in. The instant when being thrown aside would become the foundation for rising up. For now, she simply reached for the platter, perfectly, professionally, gathering her power for the moment when invisibility would no longer be an option. The storm was coming, and Elena Sterling was ready. The thing about cruelty is that it rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with fanfare or warning. It simply settles into a room like cold air, seeping through the cracks until everyone is shivering, and no one can remember when they were last warm. Elena stood at table 12, the rejected caviar platter in her hands, and watched Victoria Harrington prepare for battle. The woman had not moved from her seat, but her entire body had shifted into a different posture. Shoulders back, chin raised, eyes narrowed with the kind of focus that preceded violence. The dining room around them continued its elegant dance, servers gliding between tables, the soft clink of silverware against porcelain, the murmur of conversation, and the occasional burst of laughter from guests who existed in a different reality, one where dignity was assumed rather than fought for. But at table 12, the air had changed, become thick, dangerous. Everyone within a 20-foot radius could feel it, the way animals sense an approaching storm. Conversations at neighboring tables had grown quieter. Heads turned surreptitiously, trying to witness without being seen witnessing. This was not about food. Elena understood that now. This had never been about food. It was about power, about who got to claim it and who had to beg for scraps of it, about the invisible hierarchies that governed every interaction between women, the unspoken rules about age and beauty and worth that no one questioned, because questioning them meant admitting they existed in the first place. Victoria was looking at Elena the way a mirror looks at its subject, with absolute honesty and absolute cruelty, seeing everything, judging everything, finding everything wanting. "How long have you been serving, Amy?" Victoria asked, her voice deceptively gentle. Elena knew a trap when she heard one. 20 years, madam. 20 years! And you are still doing this. Still carrying plates, still taking orders from people younger than yourself. Victoria leaned forward slightly. Do you know what that tells me? No, madam. It tells me you failed to advance, failed to become something more, failed to escape the only job that would still hire a woman your age. The words landed like slaps, each one precise, each one designed to hurt in a specific way. Robert Walsh set down his water glass with more force than necessary. Victoria, for God's sake. What, Robert? I'm simply having a conversation with our server, making small talk. Surely you are not suggesting I should ignore the help entirely. The word hung in the air. Help. As if Elena were not a person but a function. As if her humanity could be reduced to utility and discarded when that utility expired. Elena felt something shift inside her chest. A familiar rage, yes, but something else too. Recognition. Because she had used that same logic when building Constellation. Had thought of staff as resources to be optimized rather than people to be honored. Had created systems that treated servers as interchangeable parts rather than individuals with lives and stories and worth. She was looking at her own cruelty reflected back at her, and it was uglier than she had imagined. May I bring you something else, madam? Elena asked, her voice steady despite the storm building inside her. Victoria studied her face. You are very calm. Most women your age become emotional when confronted with their failures, defensive, weepy. But you just stand there. Is that because you have accepted your lot in life, or because you have simply stopped feeling altogether? This was the game Victoria played, not just insulting but analyzing, making her cruelty seem intellectual, turning her judgments into observations, as if she were a scientist studying specimens rather than a woman destroying other women. I am here to serve you, madam, not to discuss my emotional state. Victoria smiled. It was not a kind smile. See, Robert, this is what I mean. No passion, no fire, just compliance. This is what happens when women give up on having real lives. They become automatons, going through motions without meaning. She turned back to Elena. Let me guess your story. You had dreams once, wanted to be something more than this. But life happened. Maybe a marriage that did not work out. Maybe children who needed you to be practical instead of ambitious. Maybe just the slow erosion of hope that comes from being told year after year that your time is past. Each word was a knife, cutting with surgical precision. And the terrible thing was that Victoria was not entirely wrong. She was describing the lives of countless women Elena had met. Women like Margaret, who had sacrificed dreams for survival. Women like Rachel, whose brilliance was constrained by the demands of single motherhood and an industry that refused to value experience over youth. But Victoria was also describing herself. Elena could see it now. The bitterness in Victoria's voice was not directed at Elena alone. It was directed at every woman who reminded Victoria of her own compromises, her own lost dreams, her own slow disappearance into invisibility. "I have the wine list," Elena said, changing the subject with the kind of professional grace that came from decades of practice. "May I suggest something to pair with your meal?" "Oh, you may suggest," Victoria said, "though I doubt you know enough about wine to make a meaningful recommendation." "Let me guess. You will suggest something safe, something popular, something that requires no actual knowledge because you assume I am too stupid to notice the difference." Elena opened the wine list. She knew every bottle by heart, had selected each one personally, had tasted them all, some multiple times, to understand their character and complexity. This was her list, her expertise, her passion. But as Amy Chen, she was expected to know nothing. "What would you recommend, madam?" Elena asked, playing her role perfectly. Victoria's smile widened. "I want the 2014 Domaine de la Romanée Conti la Tâche. Do you even know what that is?" Elena knew exactly what it was. An $18,000 bottle of wine. One of the finest Burgundies in the world, kept in the cellar under dual lock, requiring both the general manager and the owner to authorize its release. It was reserved for special occasions. Marcus had bought it for their anniversary next week. "I will need to check if we have that available, madam." "Of course you will, because you do not know your own wine list. Typical. Go ask someone who actually understands wine if you can have access to a bottle that costs more than you make in 6 months." Robert Walsh stood up abruptly. "I need to use the restroom, excuse me." He walked away quickly, his discomfort visible in every step. Elena watched him go and understood. He was a good man witnessing a terrible thing and lacking the courage to stop it. It was easier to leave than to confront. Easier to pretend he had not seen than to acknowledge the violence happening in front of him. Men had been doing this for centuries, witnessing the destruction of women and calling it none of their business. Elena walked to the service station where Rachel was waiting. Her face showed the kind of anger that came from seeing your own experience reflected in someone else's suffering. "She is destroying you," Rachel whispered. "Amy, please, let me talk to David. We can switch your section." "No." "But why? Why are you letting her do this to you?" Elena looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had been enduring small cruelties for years, who had learned that survival meant silence, who was watching someone else get hurt and feeling the pain as if it were her own. "Because someone needs to see it," Elena said quietly. "Someone needs to witness exactly how cruel powerful people can be to women they deem worthless, and then someone needs to show that we are not worthless, that we never were." Rachel stared at her. "Who are you?" "I am a woman who is tired of being invisible." Elena went to find David. He was in his office, on the phone, his voice tense. She caught fragments of the conversation through the partially open door. "No, the timing is not ideal. Harrington is here tonight. I understand the IPO closes Friday, but..." "Yes, Mr. Morrison, I will handle it." He looked up, saw Elena, and his face went from anxious to irritated. He ended the call quickly. "What?" he snapped. "Ms. Harrington has requested the 2014 La Tâche." His face went pale. "That is impossible. That wine requires dual authorization. It is locked in the Grand Cru cellar." "It is reserved. And why are you eavesdropping on my phone calls?" "I was not eavesdropping. The door was open. And Ms. Harrington specifically requested this wine. If we cannot produce it, she will write that we claim to have a wine list we cannot actually access." David ran his hands through his hair. "This is insane. She is testing us, testing you. She knows we cannot get that wine without the owner's permission. And I cannot bother Mrs. Sterling with this right now, not with everything else happening." "Then I will get the owner's permission." "You? Amy, you have been here 3 weeks. You do not even know who the owner is." Elena looked at him. I know enough to know that if we do not provide this wine, Constellation will be destroyed in her review. Is that what you want? David's face twisted with frustration and fear. Fine, fine. But if this backfires, it is on you. I will have you escorted out by security and you will never work in this city again. Do you understand? Perfectly. Elena walked to the private corridor that led to the Grand Cru cellar. The hallway was dimmed, quiet, insulated from the noise of the dining room. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor. Each step a choice. Each choice bringing her closer to a line she would have to cross. The door required biometric access. She pressed her thumb to the scanner, the one she had installed herself when designing the restaurant's security system. There was a moment, a single second, when the technology processed her identity, when it confirmed who she was. Elena Sterling, owner, creator, the invisible woman who had built everything Victoria was currently judging. The lock clicked open. She descended the stairs into the temperature-controlled vault. The air changed as she went deeper, cooler, drier, perfectly calibrated to preserve the wine at its ideal state. She had spent weeks researching the exact specifications for this cellar, had consulted with experts in France, had insisted on redundant climate control systems because she could not bear the thought of losing these bottles to a mechanical failure. Row after row of wine stretched before her, each bottle a small fortune, each one chosen with care and knowledge and love. This was her collection, her passion made physical. She knew every vintage, every vineyard, every story behind every label. She walked past the Barolos and the Brunellos, past the Premier Cru Burgundies and the classified growth Bordeaux. Her fingers trailed along the racks as if greeting old friends. These bottles were companions in a way few people could understand. They represented time and place and the dedication of people who understood that some things could not be rushed. She found the La Tâche on the top shelf of the Grand Cru section. The bottle was dusty, undisturbed, waiting for the perfect moment. Marcus had bought it 3 years ago at auction, had outbid a collector from Hong Kong and another from London. The price had been absurd even by billionaire standards, but he had bought it anyway because it was her favorite vintage from her favorite producer, and because he understood that love was sometimes measured in gestures that made no logical sense. They were supposed to drink it next week, their anniversary. 8 years of marriage, 12 years of partnership, a lifetime of choosing each other every single day. Elena lifted the bottle with the reverence it deserved. $18,000, but more than that. A piece of earth and time and human dedication turned into something transcendent. The weight of it in her hands was familiar, comforting. She stood there in the cellar, alone, holding this bottle that represented so much more than wine, thinking about what she was about to do. She could refuse Victoria, could tell her the wine was not available, could protect this bottle, this moment, this piece of her life that was still sacred. But then nothing would change. Victoria would write her review. David would continue his cruelties. The system would grind forward, crushing women like Margaret and Rachel and Sophia under its weight. Sometimes you had to sacrifice what you loved to protect what mattered more. Elena carried the bottle upstairs like a sacred object, which it was, not because of its price, but because of what it represented. Every woman who had been told her dreams were too expensive. Every woman who had been told her worth did not justify the investment. Every woman who had learned to make herself smaller so that others could feel bigger. This wine was going to a woman who would not appreciate it, who would drink it as proof of her power rather than celebration of its beauty, who would use it to wound rather than to honor. But Elena was going to serve it anyway, because the point was not whether Victoria deserved it. The point was that Elena refused to let Victoria's unworthiness diminish the wine's beauty. Back in the dining room, she could feel eyes on her, staff watching in disbelief. David emerging from his office with a look of shock and suspicion on his face. How had Amy Chen accessed the locked cellar? What authority did this nobody server possess? Rachel's face showed something close to awe. She understood wine, knew what Elena was carrying, knew what it cost and what it meant. Elena approached table 12. Victoria had been watching her progress across the dining room with the intensity of a predator tracking prey. The 2014 Domaine de la Romane Conti la Tâche, madame. Victoria's eyebrows raised. You actually retrieved it. I am surprised. Either your restaurant has terrible security or you have access you should not have. She examined the bottle, checked the label, verified the vintage, looking for any excuse to send it back. Open it, double decant it. I want it breathing for 10 minutes before I will even consider tasting it. Elena performed the ritual with the precision of a master sommelier. Because she was a master sommelier, though Victoria had no way of knowing that, she opened the bottle with a satisfying pop, decanted it into a crystal vessel, watching the wine breathe, seeing the color develop. Then she rinsed the original bottle with a small amount of the wine, warming the glass, and carefully poured the decanted wine back into it. It was a complex technique, one that required knowledge and practice and respect for the wine itself. Victoria watched the entire process. For a moment, just a moment, her face showed something other than cruelty. It showed appreciation, recognition, the acknowledgement that she was witnessing real skill. Then the mask returned. Adequate. Porella. Elena poured. Victoria lifted the glass, swirled it, inhaled the bouquet. Violets and dark cherries, earth and thyme, and the patience of people who understood that great things cannot be rushed. She tasted, closed her eyes, and for 3 seconds she was somewhere else, somewhere beautiful, somewhere without anger. Then she opened her eyes, and the beauty disappeared. It is acceptable, barely. You may leave it. Elena nodded, stepped back, waited. Tell me something, Amy, Victoria said, her voice softer now, but no less dangerous. Do you have children? The question landed like a bomb, personal, invasive, designed to wound. No, madam. By choice or by circumstance. Does it matter? Of course it matters. A woman who chooses not to have children is selfish. A woman who cannot have children is pitiable. Both are equally failures, but for different reasons. Elena felt her hands clench at her sides, forced them to relax. I chose my work over motherhood, madam. Then you are a fool. Victoria's voice was flat, cold, certain. Work does not love you back. Work does not carry your legacy. Work does not give your life meaning. You have traded everything that matters for a job that anyone could do. A job that values you so little, you are still serving tables at 42. She paused and something flickered across her face. Pain, raw and exposed. I had a daughter, Sophie, 28 years old, brilliant, beautiful. She was going to be a chef, was training at a restaurant in Brooklyn. She was pregnant. 8 weeks, my grandchild, my legacy. Victoria's voice broke. She looked down at her wine glass. The restaurant owner had been warned about the gas leak multiple times, but fixing it would have meant closing for a week, losing revenue. So he did nothing. The kitchen exploded. Sophie died. My grandchild died. Everything that mattered died in a fire that never should have happened. Robert Walsh had returned to the table. He touched Victoria's arm gently. Victoria, you do not have to. I want her to understand. I want her to know that choosing work over children, choosing anything over children, is the stupidest choice a woman can make. Because children are the only thing that lasts, the only legacy that matters. And I gave up my culinary career to have Sophie, and then she gave up her life to pursue the career I had abandoned. And now we are both nothing. She is dead, and I am empty, and none of it meant anything. The dining room had gone quiet around them. Other tables listening, witnesses to grief spilling out like blood from a wound. Elena felt her own grief rising. Her mother, dead 6 months, the unfinished book, the stories of invisible women, the legacy Elena was trying to honor by finishing what her mother started. I am sorry for your loss, Elena said quietly. Truly, no mother should outlive her child. No grandmother should lose her grandchild before knowing them. That is tragedy. That is injustice. And you are right to be angry. I am not angry, Victoria said. I am destroyed. You are both. And you are taking your destruction and spreading it, making other people hurt because you hurt, making other women pay for a man's choices. The restaurant owner who ignored the gas leak. He killed your daughter, not the women you destroy with your reviews. Victoria's hand moved, fast, violent, instinctive. She backhanded the caviar platter with enough force to send it flying. Time fractured, broke into fragments. Elena experienced the next 3 seconds as if they were 3 hours. She watched the mother-of-pearl platter flip through the air, watched it rotate once, twice, 3 times. The motion was almost balletic, the platter catching light as it spun, reflecting the chandelier above in quick flashes. The caviar lifted from the surface. $900 of imperial ossetra, each pearl a tiny sphere of perfection. They separated in midair, no longer a cohesive mass, but individual entities, each one following its own trajectory. Elena counted them without meaning to, her chef's brain categorizing automatically. 147 pearls of caviar, 3 ounces precisely. She had measured enough caviar to know the count by sight. The creme fraiche followed a different path, heavier, falling faster. It would hit first, then the caviar, then the platter itself. She had time to think, time to process, time to choose. She could move. The caviar was arcing toward her chest, but she had perhaps half a second to step aside. Let it hit the floor. Let the evidence scatter across the marble. Impossible to deny, but at least not on her body. Not marking her, not claiming her as victim. But stepping aside would mean Victoria won differently. Would mean Elena had flinched, had retreated, had let fear rather than principle guide her choice. And there was something else, something deeper, a knowledge that this moment needed to be as visible as possible, that the violence could not be abstract or deniable, that it needed to land on her body so that everyone could see exactly what had happened, so that no one could pretend it was an accident, so that no one could say she had provoked it by standing too close, so that the cruelty was undeniable and unavoidable and absolutely clear. Elena stood perfectly still. She kept her eyes open, watched the caviar complete its arc. It hit her chest. The creme fraiche first, cold and wet, spreading across the fabric of her white shirt. Then the caviar, each pearl landing with its own small impact. They hit and stuck, adhering to the cream, creating a grotesque mockery of a corsage, a decoration made of violence. The sensation was shocking. The cold, the wetness, the weight of it soaking through the fabric to her skin beneath. The smell of brine and ocean, rich and overwhelming. The platter hit the floor half a second later. The mother of pearl cracked on impact. The sound was musical, delicate, beautiful in a way that made the violence worse because it proved that even destruction could be aesthetic. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, deafening in its completeness. Elena stood there, caviar dripping down her chest, creme fraiche seeping through her shirt, the physical evidence of Victoria's cruelty decorating her body like a scar. She did not gasp, did not cry out, did not raise her hands to her chest to assess the damage or to hide the stain. She simply stood there, her arms at her sides, her posture straight, her face calm. She refused to give Victoria the satisfaction of seeing her broken, refused to perform the role of victim, even though she had been victimized, refused to be small even though the world was actively trying to reduce her to nothing. Around them, the dining room processed what it had witnessed. 82 people in various stages of shock and understanding, forks frozen halfway to mouths, conversations stopped mid-sentence, wine glasses suspended in air. Some people looked away immediately, uncomfortable with witnessing violence, pretending they had not seen. Some leaned forward, phones already out, documenting the moment for social media, for proof, for the story they would tell later. Some looked horrified, some looked satisfied, some looked blank, as if their brains had not yet processed what their eyes had seen. But they had all seen it. That was the point. That was why Elena had not moved. Victoria was breathing hard, her face flushed. "Trash," she said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "You are all trash, every woman who pretends to be something she is not." The words echoed, hung in the air like smoke. Then the room began to react. Not as one organism, but as many separate individuals, each processing the violence through the filter of their own experience. At table 7, a woman in her 60s stood up. She wore a cream-colored suit that spoke of old money and older confidence. Her silver hair was cut short, elegant, unapologetic. Martha Wellington, though Elena did not know her name yet, retired attorney, former prosecutor, a woman who had spent 40 years fighting battles most people never saw. "That was assault," Martha said, her voice carrying across the dining room with courtroom authority. "I am calling the police." Her husband, a man in his 70s with the comfortable posture of someone who had never been questioned, tugged at her sleeve. "Martha, sit down. Do not make a scene." "A scene?" Martha pulled her arm away. "That woman just assaulted a server. That is not a scene. That is a crime." At table 9, a young woman in her late 20s was crying. Her mascara ran in black streaks down her face. Her hands shook. Her boyfriend, uncomfortable and confused, leaned toward her. "Why are you crying? It is not even about you." The young woman turned to him, her face wet, her voice breaking. "Because I have been her. Every woman has been her. Every woman has stood there while someone threw something at us. Maybe not literally, but yes, we have all been her." Her boyfriend did not understand. Elena could see it in his face, the confusion, the slight irritation at his date being emotional about something that did not involve her. He would probably tell this story later as evidence that women were too sensitive, that they took things too personally. He would never understand that the personal was the point. At table 15, a tech entrepreneur in his 30s was already filming on his phone, narrating in real time. Holy shit. Just witnessed the Karen moment of the century at Constellation. Food Critic went full psycho on a waitress. This is going to be everywhere. He was grinning, excited by the drama, thinking about views and engagement and how many followers he would gain from being the first to post. He did not see a woman being assaulted. He saw content. At table 3, an older couple sat frozen. The woman's hand covered her mouth. The man looked at his plate, studying it as if the pattern on the porcelain held answers to questions he did not want to ask. They would leave soon, would not finish their meal, would tell themselves they did not want to be part of whatever was happening, would go home and not talk about it because talking about it would mean admitting they had watched a woman be hurt and done nothing. At table 11, 4 businesswomen in their 40s and 50s watched with expressions Elena recognized. Anger, recognition, the weary familiarity of seeing something they had experienced themselves, in different contexts, in different ways, but with the same essential violence. One of them, a black woman in a burgundy dress, caught Elena's eye, nodded once, a gesture of solidarity, of witness, of understanding that crossed the distance between their tables and said, "I see you, I know. I am sorry this is still happening." David Chen came running from his office. His face was red, panicked, desperate. "Miss Harrington! Miss Harrington, are you all right? I am so sorry for this disturbance." He did not look at Elena, did not acknowledge the caviar dripping down her shirt, did not seem to notice that she was the one who had been assaulted. "What did you do?" he screamed at Elena. "Look at this! You have upset our most important guest! What is wrong with you?" Elena looked at him. This man she had hired, this man she had trusted to run her restaurant, this man who was so afraid of losing a Michelin star that he could not see the human being standing in front of him. "She assaulted me," Elena said quietly. "She would not have assaulted you if you had not provoked her. Miss Harrington does not just attack people for no reason." Rachel stepped forward. "David, that is not what happened. I saw the whole thing." "You too, Rachel. You are supposed to be a supervisor. This is your fault. Both of you, out. You are fired. Get out of my dining room. Get out of my sight." He was screaming now, completely unraveled, making a scene far worse than anything Victoria had done, proving that the cruelty was not just Victoria's. It was systemic, built into the structure of the restaurant, built into the industry itself. Elena pulled out her phone. David's eyes widened. "What are you doing? You cannot be on your phone. You are fired. Give me that." He reached for the phone. Elena stepped back, unlocked it with her thumbprint, opened her text, found Marcus's name. She typed 3 words, code red constellation. Then she added a 4th line, "not to save me, to witness me." She hit send. David was still yelling, "Security! Someone call security! I want these women escorted out immediately!" Elena slipped the phone back into her pocket, looked at David with absolute calm. "You do not have the authority to fire me, David." He froze. "What? I am the general manager of this restaurant. I absolutely have the authority." "No, you do not." She turned to Victoria, who was watching this unfold with a mixture of shock and something that might have been regret. "Ms. Harrington, I need to tell you something. I am 42 years old. I am childless. I chose my work over motherhood. I am invisible to most people. You saw that. You used that." Victoria opened her mouth to speak. Elena held up a hand. "I am also a cordon bleu trained chef. I am a master sommelier. I am a restaurant owner. And I am the woman who designed every dish you have eaten tonight, every wine you have tasted, every detail of this room you are sitting in." The silence that followed was profound. "My name is not Amy Chen. My name is Elena Sterling. I am the executive chef and creative director of Constellation." And I went undercover in my own restaurant to understand what was broken. Tonight, you showed me. The collective gasp was like thunder, sharp, sudden, followed by a roar of whispered exclamations and shocked silence. Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, I trained you. I trained Elena Sterling on how to carry a tray. Sophia stared, her young face processing the impossible. The birthday code, 08 to 15. That is Marcus Sterling's birthday. You used it to access the cellar. You had authorization because you are the owner. Margaret was crying. Not tears of shock, but tears of recognition. You saw us. You stood with us. You let yourself be invisible to understand what we live with every single day. James, the line cook, had emerged from the kitchen. He stood in the doorway, his chef's whites spotless, his face showing the kind of emotion he usually buried under precision and focus. You complimented my knife work. The owner of this restaurant told me I had good knife work, and I told you it was just muscle memory from the service. God. Elena looked at each of them. These people who had shown her kindness when they thought she was nobody, who had shared their stories and their struggles, who had proven that the heart of a restaurant was never the dining room or the kitchen. It was the people who made it run. For 3 weeks, Elena said, her voice carrying to every corner of the dining room. I worked as a server in my own restaurant. I wanted to see what you see, feel what you feel, understand what I had built. She turned to address not just her staff, but every guest, every witness to what had happened. I learned that David assigned sections based on age and appearance, that young servers got the window tables and the best tips, while women over 40 were hidden in corners like secrets to be ashamed of. I learned that Margaret Rodriguez, who has 30 years of experience and can pair wine better than anyone I have ever met, was called grandmother by guests who saw her age before they saw her expertise. Margaret nodded, unable to speak. I learned that Rachel Martinez, a single mother working herself to exhaustion, was denied every request for schedule flexibility, that she missed her daughter's birthdays and school conferences because David told her that if she could not commit fully, she should work somewhere less demanding. I learned that excellent work is not enough when the system is designed to make you fail. Rachel was crying now too. You saw that? You saw all of that? I saw everything. I saw James being screamed at for being too slow when he was not slow at all, just careful. Too careful for a manager who valued speed over the mental health of a veteran managing PTSD through precision. James closed his eyes, breathed deeply. I saw Sophia being promoted not because of her competence, but because David decided she had the right face for the restaurant. Young, pretty, Asian but not too Asian, feminine but not threatening. I saw her feel guilty for accepting an opportunity she had earned, because she understood it was given for the wrong reasons. Sophia wiped her eyes. I did not know how to say no. I needed the job. You should never have to choose between opportunity and integrity. That is the system's failure, not yours. Elena turned her attention to the entire dining room, to the guests who were witnessing a revolution they had not paid for but were receiving anyway. I built this restaurant to be perfect. I obsessed over every detail, the lighting, the acoustics, the temperature of the bread plates. I wanted Constellation to be a temple to excellence, but I forgot the most important detail. I forgot that excellence without humanity is just cruelty with better plating. She turned to David. You threw your staff to the wolves to protect a critic. You fired 2 women for being assaulted. You prioritized reputation over human dignity. You are terminated effective immediately. David made a choking sound. His face went from red to gray. Mrs. Sterling, Elena, I did not know. You did not know because I did not want you to know. I wanted to see how you treated staff when you thought no one important was watching. And what I saw, David, is that you are a coward who values power over people. A woman in the back of the room started clapping, then another, then the woman at table 7 who had offered to call the police, then more. The applause built, not universal, not everyone, but enough to matter. Victoria sat at table 12, mascara starting to run, looking smaller than she had moments before. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. You were right. I hate myself. I have hated myself for so long I forgot how to do anything else. Elena looked at her. This woman who had tried to destroy her. This woman who was herself being destroyed by grief and fear and the weight of invisible expectations. I know, Elena said. I see you, Victoria. I see the pain. And I am not dropping the assault charge. What you did was criminal, but I also understand why you did it. And when this is over, we are going to talk. As women, not as server and critic, as women who have both been told we are worthless and believed it long enough to hurt other people. The private elevator at the back of the restaurant dinged. The doors opened. Marcus Sterling stepped out, tall, calm, powerful, in the way that billionaires are powerful, as if they own the air itself. Behind him was Lawrence Hayes, his attorney, briefcase in hand. But Marcus did not rush to Elena's side, did not sweep in to rescue her. He stood at the edge of the dining room, watching, witnessing, letting her moment be hers. Their eyes met across the space. Elena saw in his face what she needed to see: pride, love, trust, the knowledge that she had not needed him to save her because she had saved herself. She nodded to him, a small gesture, an acknowledgement. Marcus walked forward slowly. When he reached Elena, he took off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders, not claiming her, caring for her. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No, just angry and ready." Marcus turned to face the room. "My name is Marcus Sterling. I own this building, but I do not own this restaurant. My wife does. Elena is the creative force behind Constellation, the chef, the visionary, the reason any of you are here tonight." He looked at David. "You are terminated effective immediately. Lawrence will handle the paperwork." David opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the floor. Marcus looked at Victoria. "Ms. Harrington, you assaulted my wife. There will be legal consequences. But Elena has asked me to let her handle this her way, so I am going to witness what she has built here, not as her savior, as her partner." He stepped back, gave Elena the floor, made himself secondary to her moment. Elena faced her staff, these people who had worked for her without knowing who she was, who had shown her kindness and competence, and the quiet dignity of people who survive in systems designed to erase them. "To every woman I failed to see," she said, "to every woman whose age I used against her without knowing it, to every woman I made invisible by building a system that valued perfection over humanity, I am sorry." Margaret stepped forward from the service station, tears streaming down her face. "You saw us. In the end, you saw us. I see you now, and I will never stop seeing you. Starting tomorrow, Constellation begins again, with new management, new policies, and a promise. No one gets to abuse you here. Not a guest, not a manager, not me. This is our house. And in our house, dignity is not negotiable." The staff applauded, cried, held each other. Sophia pushed through to Elena. "Mrs. Sterling, Elena, thank you. Thank you for showing me that standing up is possible. Thank you for being young enough to still believe it." Lawrence Hayes approached Victoria's table. "Ms. Harrington, I need you to come with me. We have some paperwork to discuss." Victoria stood on shaking legs, looked at Elena one more time. "I had a daughter, Sophie. She died 5 years ago. She was 28. She was 8 weeks pregnant. My grandchild. I have been killing everyone who reminds me of her, of what I lost, of what I gave up to be her mother only to lose her anyway." "I know," Elena said gently. "We will talk about Sophie when you are ready. Will you really forgive me?" "I am going to try, because forgiveness is not about you deserving it. It is about me choosing not to carry your pain as well as my own." Security guards appeared. They escorted Victoria out, not roughly, but firmly. She went without resisting, looking back once at the dining room that had been her kingdom and was now her shame. The guests began to leave, some excited, some disturbed, all of them knowing they had witnessed something that would be talked about for years. Martha from table 7 approached Elena before leaving. "I am an attorney, retired. If you need help pressing charges, I will represent you pro bono." "Thank you, I will call you." "What you did tonight, standing there, not moving, not crying, just being present in your own dignity, that changed something. You know that, right?" I'm starting to understand. When the last guest had gone, when the staff had finished cleaning, when the dining room was empty except for the evidence of the night's violence, Elena sat down at table 12. Marcus sat across from her. Rachel and Margaret and Sophia and James joined them. A family formed not by blood but by shared witness to transformation. "What happens now?" Rachel asked. "Now," Elena said, "we rebuild. Together. You are not my employees. You are my partners. And tomorrow, we start creating the restaurant we all deserve from the beginning." She looked at the caviar stain on her shirt. the physical proof of what had happened. She would keep this shirt, frame it maybe, or burn it. She had not decided yet, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had been invisible. She had been assaulted. She had been called trash. And she had stood in the center of it all and refused to disappear. That was power, real power, the kind that could not be taken away because it came from within. The storm had come, and Elena Sterling had not just survived it. She had become it. The revolution was just beginning. In the moments after a revolution, there is always silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of breath being held, of minds trying to catch up with what eyes have witnessed, of reality reorganizing itself around a truth that cannot be unseen. The dining room of Constellation held that silence now. 82 people suspended between who they had been when they walked in and who they would become when they walked out. The air felt different, thicker, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Elena stood at the center of it all, still wearing Marcus's jacket over her caviar-stained shirt, and watched the room begin to move again. Small movements at first. A woman at table 7 gathering her purse. A man at table 15 lowering his phone. The tech entrepreneur who had been filming, his excitement curdling into something more complicated as he realized he had documented not entertainment but evidence. The woman who had stood first, Martha Wellington, was already walking toward Elena. She moved with purpose, each step deliberate. A woman who had spent a lifetime arriving at crime scenes and courtrooms, who understood that justice required witnesses willing to speak. She stopped in front of Elena. Up close, her face showed the kind of lines that came from smiling and frowning in equal measure, a life fully lived, fully felt. "My name is Martha Wellington," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I am a retired prosecutor. I witnessed what happened here tonight, and I want you to know that what that woman did was not just assault. It was a hate crime. Violence directed at you because of your age, your gender, your perceived status. I will testify to that, pro bono, no charge, because someone needs to." Elena felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, relief. The relief of being seen, of having her experience validated by someone who understood the law, who knew the difference between an accident and an attack. "Thank you," Elena said. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Martha's husband had approached more slowly, hanging back, uncomfortable but present. "Martha takes these things seriously," he said, as if apologizing for his wife's competence. Martha turned to him with the kind of look that suggested this was a very old argument. "Robert, when you see a crime, you report it. That is not taking things seriously. That is basic citizenship. I just meant—" "I know what you meant, and we are discussing it later." She turned back to Elena, pressed a business card into her hand. "Call me tomorrow. We will talk about next steps. Criminal charges, civil suit, restraining order, whatever you need." The women from table 11 approached next, 4 of them, ranging in age from early 40s to late 50s. Fieries, all dressed in the kind of business attire that spoke of boardrooms and budgets and battles fought in conference rooms. They moved together, a unit, supporting each other with the unconscious choreography of women who had been fighting similar fights for years. The woman in the burgundy dress, the one who had caught Elena's eye earlier, spoke first. "We are the founders of Women in Finance Initiative. We have been watching what you built here, what you just revealed, and we want you to know that you are not alone in this." Another woman, white hair cut in a sharp bob, added, "We have all been that server. Maybe not literally, but we have all been dismissed, underestimated, told we were too old or too aggressive or too emotional. What you did tonight, standing there, refusing to disappear, that matters." A third woman, South Asian, probably in her early 50s, said quietly, "My daughter is 22. She wants to work in restaurants. I have been telling her it is too hard, too cruel, that she should choose something safer. But watching you tonight, I realize I have been teaching her to make herself small before anyone else can. You just showed her another way." The fourth woman, Latina, with silver streaks in her dark hair, simply reached out and squeezed Elena's hand. No words, just the pressure of human contact, the acknowledgement that sometimes words were not enough. They left their cards too, offers of support, connections, resources. The invisible network of women who helped other women, not because they would get anything in return, but because they understood that lifting others was the only way any of them truly rose. But not everyone was supportive. Elena could see the other reactions playing out across the dining room. Tables leaving quickly, uncomfortable with the intimacy of what they had witnessed, wanting their fine dining experience to be about pleasure, not politics, not ready to acknowledge that the two had always been inseparable. A man at table 4, 60-something, red-faced, stood up and called across the room, "This is ridiculous. You set that woman up. You provoked her. You wanted this to happen so you could play victim and get attention." His wife, younger, maybe early 40s, touched his arm. "Richard, please." "No, this is exactly what is wrong with everything now. Women crying victim every time they do not get their way, creating drama, destroying people's reputations. That critic was just doing her job." Martha Wellington turned to face him, her prosecutor voice activated. "Her job is to review food, not to assault servers. And if you cannot tell the difference between criticism and violence, that says more about you than about anyone else in this room." Richard sputtered. "You do not know what you are talking about. I spent 30 years prosecuting assault cases. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Shall I explain the legal definition of battery to you? Or would you prefer to leave before you say something that makes you liable as well?" Richard grabbed his coat. His wife followed, apologizing to no one in particular, the way women apologize for men who refuse to apologize for themselves. They were not the only ones leaving. Perhaps a third of the dining room departed within the next 10 minutes. People who had come for an experience and gotten more truth than they had paid for. People who preferred their injustice abstract and deniable. People who wanted to believe that the world was fair, and systems were just and hard work was always rewarded. But 2/3 stayed to witness, stayed to process, stayed because something had shifted in the room and they wanted to understand what they had just seen. The staff had gathered near the service station, not just the front-of-house team, but the entire restaurant, line cooks emerging from the kitchen, their whites stained with the evidence of the evening service. Dishwashers, usually invisible even to their co-workers, standing at the edges. The prep cooks who arrived before dawn. The porters who cleaned after midnight. All of them present. All of them witnesses. 12 people who had just discovered that their reality was not what they thought. That the invisible waitress they had trained and befriended and supported was actually the woman who owned everything they stood on. Sophia was crying, not sad tears, confused tears, the tears of someone whose world had just reorganized itself around new information. Her hands shook as she tried to wipe her face, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "You let me train you," she said, her voice breaking. "I told you where to stand, how to hold the tray, which fork goes where. I explained the numbered table system like you were stupid. I was so condescending. I treated you like you knew nothing." Elena walked to her, took her young hands in her own older ones. "You were not condescending, you were teaching, and I needed to learn. Not the mechanics of serving, I already knew that, but the reality of what it feels like to be new, uncertain, dependent on the knowledge of others. You gave me that gift." "But I am 22, you are 42. You are the owner. You should not have been learning from me." "Why not? You know things I do not know." "Age does not determine who gets to be the teacher and who gets to be the student. Expertise does. Experience does. And you have experience I needed." Sophia looked at her with wonder. "No one has ever said that to me before, that my knowledge mattered. My parents think what I do here is just a job until I become a doctor. They do not understand that I am learning things that matter, that I am good at this."
"You are exceptional at this, and starting tomorrow, I am going to make sure everyone knows it."
James stepped forward. His chef's whites were pristine, but his face showed the kind of exhaustion that came from holding yourself together through trauma. His hands, usually so steady with a knife, were trembling slightly. "You saw my episode," he said quietly. 3 days ago, when I dropped the plate because I heard the door slam and it sounded like an explosion. When I had to step outside and breathe for 10 minutes because the sound had taken me back to Fallujah." Elena remembered. She had been clearing tables near the kitchen when it happened, had seen James's face go white, had watched him walk out the back door with the jerky movements of someone fighting their own nervous system. You followed me outside, James continued. You did not ask what was wrong. You did not try to fix me. You just stood there, a few feet away until I could breathe again. Then you said, "Take your time. The kitchen will wait." And you went back inside like it was nothing. It was not nothing. It was you needing space. That should always be honored. David would have fired me on the spot. He has been looking for a reason since the day he hired me. Said I was too slow, too cautious, too damaged. You were the owner, and you treated me like I mattered more than the service. Why? Because you do matter more than the service. The service exists to serve people. You are people. That should not be complicated. A young line cook, maybe 19, raised his hand tentatively. Can I ask a question? Of Are you going to fire all of us now since we know who you are? The question hung in the air. Elena saw the fear in his face, the assumption that revelation meant retribution, that being seen meant being punished. Why would I fire you? Because we know. Because you wanted to be secret and now the secret is out. Because we are witnesses to whatever you were investigating. Elena looked around at all of them. I was not investigating you. I was investigating myself. The system I created, the culture I allowed. You are not my enemies. You are my teachers. You showed me the truth. Why would I punish you for that? Margaret was the last to approach. Her face was wet with tears, but her posture was straight, proud, 56 years old, and still standing despite everything that had tried to break her. You saw us, she said. Her voice was steady but thick with emotion. When no one else did. When we had become so invisible we had started to believe we did not exist. You saw us. You were always visible, Margaret. I just needed to stand where you were standing to see what you were seeing. No, Margaret shook her head. You chose to stand where we were standing. That is different. You could have stayed on the 71st floor. You could have sent consultants or secret shoppers or done focus groups. But you came down here. You put on the uniform. You took the abuse. You let yourself be invisible to understand what invisible costs. That is not the same as seeing. That is bearing witness. Rachel had been quiet through all of this, standing slightly apart, her mind visibly working through the implications. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone processing a fundamental shift in reality. 3 weeks ago, you asked me about my daughters. You asked their names, their ages, what they like to do. No one else here knows their names. Not David, not the other servers, just you, Amy, Elena, whoever you are. I am both. That is what I am learning. I am not just Elena the owner or Amy the server. I am all of it, the parts I am proud of and the parts I am ashamed of, the powerful woman and the invisible one. They are both real. You asked about my daughters because you cared, or because you were gathering information. Elena met her eyes. I asked because I cared, because you mentioned needing to leave early for a parent-teacher conference and David denied your request, because I saw you cry in the locker room when you realized you were going to miss your daughter's choir concert, because I understood what it cost to choose between your children and your survival. But you do not have children. No, but I know what it is like to have to choose between the life you want and the life you can afford. I chose my work. You are choosing both. That is harder. That deserves support, not punishment. Rachel's face crumpled, not with sadness, with relief. I thought I was failing at everything, as a mother, as a sommelier, as a woman, because I could not be perfect at any of it. You are not supposed to be perfect. You are supposed to be human, and humans need support systems, not impossible standards. Rachel had been quiet, processing, her mind working through implications and possibilities. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. What happens now? To us, to Constellation, to everything. Elena looked at the assembled staff, 12 people who had shown up for a regular Tuesday shift and gotten a revolution instead. 12 people who had just learned that the hierarchies they thought were fixed were actually just choices, and choices could be changed. Now we rebuild, together, not as owner and staff, as partners, because I cannot fix what is broken without you. I do not even fully understand what is broken without you. She gestured to the empty dining room, the tables that still held half-finished meals, the wine glasses abandoned mid-pour. We are closed tomorrow, not for renovation, for conversation. I want to hear from every single person who works here. what needs to change, what you need, what dignity looks like in practice, not just theory. David Chen had been standing apart from the group, alone, his face ashen, his entire world crumbling around him. He had been so certain of his authority, his rightness, his value. And in the space of 15 minutes, it had all been revealed as built on sand. Marcus approached him with Lawrence Hayes, the attorney, at his side. Lawrence held a folder, the severance paperwork already prepared, because Marcus had known this moment was coming, even if David had not. "David," Marcus said, his voice neither cruel nor kind, simply factual. "You are terminated effective immediately. Gross negligence, creating a hostile work environment, wage theft. Lawrence has documented everything from the past 3 weeks. You can sign the severance agreement now, or we can discuss your behavior in court. Your choice." David's hand shook as he took the folder. "I was just trying to run a good restaurant. I was trying to get us a Michelin star. I was trying to make Constellation the best." "You were trying to make Constellation profitable," Marcus corrected, "at the expense of the people who made it run. That is not excellence. That is exploitation." "I need this job. I have a mortgage, a reputation to maintain." Elena stepped forward. "You should have thought of that before you stole from your staff, before you called Margaret too old, before you screamed at James for having PTSD, before you fired Rachel and me for being assaulted. You built this moment, David. These are your consequences." David signed the papers with a shaking hand, his signature barely legible. The security guards who had been waiting discreetly stepped forward. "This way, sir." He was escorted out through the service entrance, the same exit he had tried to force Elena and Rachel through when he fired them. The poetry of it was not lost on anyone watching. When David was gone, Elena turned her attention to Victoria. The critic had been sitting alone at table 12 throughout all of this, watching, processing, her face showing the kind of devastation that came from seeing yourself clearly for the first time and hating what you saw. Marcus touched Elena's shoulder. "I can have her arrested now. Martha already said she would testify." "I know, but I need to talk to her first. Alone." "Elena..." "Not to forgive her, to understand her. There is a difference." Marcus studied her face, saw the determination there, the need to complete this on her terms. 5 minutes, then Lawrence and I are coming back in. Agreed?" "Agreed." The staff began to disperse, giving Elena space. Rachel lingered. "Are you sure? She could still be dangerous." "She is not dangerous to me anymore. She is only dangerous to herself." When the room had cleared, Elena walked to table 12 and sat down across from Victoria. The same table where this had all begun, the same seats. But everything was different now. Victoria looked smaller than she had an hour ago. The power that had radiated from her like heat had dissipated. She looked her age, 55, tired, sad, human in a way that power had been hiding. "I threw caviar at you," Victoria said. Her voice was hoarse, as if she had been screaming, though she had not been. "You did." "I assaulted you, in public, in front of witnesses. I committed a crime." "Yes." Victoria's hands were shaking. She clasped them together on the table, trying to still the tremor. "Why are you sitting here? Why are you not celebrating? You won. You exposed me. You revealed yourself as this powerful, successful woman, while showing the world that I am just a bitter old critic who attacks people for sport. Is that what you think this was about? Winning? What else could it be about?" Elena leaned forward. "Victoria, look at me. Really look at me." Victoria raised her eyes. They were red, swollen. The mascara had run and dried in streaks down her face. "I am 42 years old," Elena said. "In this industry, that makes me old, past my prime, invisible. I built this restaurant to prove I was still relevant, still worthy, still deserving of attention and respect. I built it out of fear, the same fear that drives you. You do not understand. I understand that you had a daughter, Sophie. I understand that she died 5 years ago. I understand that she was training to be a chef when she died. And I understand that every woman you have destroyed since then has been a stand-in for the daughter you could not save, and the dreams you gave up to raise her." Victoria made a sound, not quite a sob, more like air being forced from lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. "How did you—" "I researched you. Before tonight, I knew you were coming. I knew you were cruel. But I wanted to understand why, so I looked up your history, your career, your life, and I found the articles about Sophie, about the kitchen fire, about your grief. then you know that I deserve whatever happens to me. I have been punishing innocent people for something that was not their fault. I have been cruel because I could not be anything else. Elena reached across the table, did not take Victoria's hand, just placed her own hand palm up on the table between them. An offer, not of absolution, of connection. I am not going to tell you that your pain excuses what you did. It does not. You assaulted me. You have destroyed careers. You have weaponized your grief against people who did nothing except remind you of what you lost. Victoria nodded. I know. But I am also not going to tell you that you are beyond redemption, because I do not believe that. I believe that people can change, that pain can be transformed into something other than more pain, that you can choose differently. I do not know how. Then learn. That is what I'm doing. Learning how to be better than my fear. Learning how to build something that does not require other people to be small so I can feel big. Learning how to be powerful without being cruel. Silence settled between them, not comfortable, but honest. What happens now? Victoria asked. To me, legally. That depends on what you choose. I can press criminal charges. Martha Wellington is already offering to represent me. You will be arrested, tried, probably convicted, given the number of witnesses and the video evidence. You will lose your career, your reputation, everything. Victoria nodded. I understand. Or, Elena continued, you can plead guilty, accept responsibility, do community service, get therapy, and help me change this industry. Not as a critic, as a teacher, a mentor, someone who understands the cost of cruelty and chooses differently. Victoria looked up sharply. Why would you offer me that? Because punishment without rehabilitation just creates more pain. Because you are not just a villain in this story. You are also a woman who was hurt and never healed. And because my mother taught me that breaking cycles is more important than breaking people. Your mother died 6 months ago. She was a food writer, spent her career documenting the invisible women in this industry. I went undercover to finish her work, to understand what she was trying to show the world. Victoria's face crumbled. I'm so sorry. For your loss, for my cruelty, for everything. I know you are. But sorry is not enough. Sorry is just the beginning. The question is what comes after sorry. What you build from the wreckage. Who you choose to become. Marcus appeared in the doorway. 5 minutes had become 10. Lawrence was with him, papers in hand. Time is up, Marcus said gently. Elena stood. Think about what I offered. You have until tomorrow to decide. Criminal trial or community service. Your choice. She turned to leave. Victoria's voice stopped her. Elena. She turned back. Thank you for seeing me, the real me. Not the monster, not the victim. Just the person who made terrible choices and now has to live with them. We all have to live with our choices, Victoria. The question is whether we let them define us or refine us. Elena walked away, joined Marcus at the door. Together they watched as Lawrence approached Victoria with the legal documents. The choice laid out in black and white. Sign the plea agreement or face trial. Victoria signed. Her hand steady this time. The choice made. Outside Constellation, the street was quiet. The city that never slept was taking a breath. A few photographers had gathered, tipped off by the viral videos already spreading. Flashes went off as Elena and Marcus emerged. Mrs. Sterling, is it true you went undercover in your own restaurant? Mrs. Sterling, are you pressing charges against Victoria Harrington? Mrs. Sterling, what message does this send to women in the restaurant industry? Marcus's security detail created a barrier, guided them to the waiting car, but Elena paused, turned to face the cameras. Yes, I went undercover. Yes, I am pressing charges, and yes, I have a message. To every woman who has been told she is too old, too invisible, too irrelevant, you are none of those things. You are exactly what this world needs, and I am going to spend the rest of my career proving it. The cameras flashed, the questions continued, but Marcus guided her into the car and they pulled away from the curb, leaving the chaos behind. In the quiet of the car, Elena let herself feel everything she had been holding back. The fear, the rage, the triumph, the exhaustion, it all crashed over her at once. Marcus held her, did not try to fix it or minimize it or explain it away, just held her while she shook with the release of 3 weeks of tension. You were magnificent, he said when she had calmed. I was terrified. You were both. That is what courage is. What happens now to us, to everything? Marcus smiled. Now we go home. We open a very expensive bottle of wine that is not the La Tâche because you sacrificed that one for the cause. And we plan how to change an industry. Just like that? Just like that? At home, in their penthouse overlooking the city, Marcus poured wine while Elena changed out of her caviar-stained clothes. She stood in the closet, holding the ruined shirt in her hands, turning it over, examining the stains. Black pearls of caviar had dried into the fabric. The crème fraîche had left a spreading stain, yellowish white, impossible to remove. The shirt was expensive, custom-made, the kind of thing she would normally have sent to specialist cleaners who charged $100 to restore delicate fabrics. But she was not going to clean it. She was not going to restore it. She was going to keep it exactly as it was. It was evidence of violence, of cruelty, of the moment everything changed, but it was also evidence of something else, of survival, of standing still when every instinct screamed to move, of refusing to let violence define her worth. She folded the shirt carefully, placed it in a garment bag, wrote on the outside in permanent marker, November 19th, 2025. Table 12, the night I stopped being invisible. She would keep it in the back of her closet, not displayed like a trophy, but preserved like a document, a reminder of what she had survived, of what she had chosen, of who she was becoming. She changed into soft clothes, yoga pants, an oversized sweater that had been her mother's. She pulled her hair out of its ponytail and let it fall loose around her shoulders. Let herself be soft after being hard for so long. When she joined Marcus on the balcony, he had already poured 2 glasses of wine. Not the La Tâche. That was gone. Sacrificed to the cause. But a good Burgundy from their personal collection. Something to mark the moment without pretending it was a celebration. The city stretched below them. Millions of lights. Millions of lives being lived. Millions of stories being written at this exact moment. She was just one person. Her story was just one story. But stories had power. Stories changed things. Stories became movements when enough people decided they mattered. I want to create a foundation, Elena said, accepting the wine glass he offered. For women in the restaurant industry, scholarships for culinary school, legal aid for workers facing discrimination or harassment, mental health support because this industry destroys people and then blames them for being destroyed. A place where women can learn that they do not have to accept abuse to succeed. Then we will create it, Marcus said. Simple, certain, the way he always was when she needed him to be. I want to fund it myself, not as a tax write-off, not as philanthropy that comes with my name on a building. Real money, serious money, enough to actually make a difference. How much are you thinking? 10 million to start, maybe more, depending on what we learn in the first year. Marcus did not flinch. 10 million was real money, even for them. But he just nodded. What would you want it to do specifically? Elena had been thinking about this for weeks, since reading her mother's journals, since understanding the scope of what needed to change. Scholarships for women over 35 who want to enter or return to the culinary profession. Because right now, if you are not young, you are not worth investing in. Legal defense fund for workers filing discrimination or harassment complaints. Because most people cannot afford to fight even when they are right. Therapy and mental health services specifically designed for restaurant workers. Because the trauma is real and no one is addressing it. And maybe a hotline, a place to call when you are being abused and do not know what to do. That is ambitious. It needs to be. Small changes do not fix systemic problems. We need to change the entire culture of how this industry treats women, especially women over 40, especially women whose society has decided are invisible. Marcus looked at her with the expression he always had when she was being most herself. Pride mixed with awe. You are going to change the world, are you not? I'm going to try. That is all anyone can do. What else? I know you have more ideas. You always do. Elena smiled. I want to rewrite the Constellation Employee Handbook. Make it a model for the industry. Transparent salary information. No more secret pay scales where men make more than women for the same work. Flexible scheduling that actually accommodates family responsibilities instead of punishing people for having lives outside work. Zero tolerance for age discrimination. Zero tolerance for beauty standards that favor youth. Zero tolerance for any kind of harassment or abuse. That will be expensive. Labor costs will go up significantly. I know, but we can afford it. And more importantly, it is the right thing to do. I cannot ask other restaurants to change if I am not willing to change myself. What about Rachel? You mentioned making her co-owner. Elena took a sip of wine, let it sit on her tongue, tasted the earth and time that went into making it. I want to give her 50% equity in Constellation. Make her an actual partner, not just an employee with a fancy title. Marcus went very still. That is not a small decision. That is giving away half of a business worth tens of millions of dollars. I know exactly what it is worth, and I know exactly what she is worth. She has given years of her life to Constellation, been underpaid, overworked, denied basic dignity. And through all of it, she showed up with excellence and kindness and leadership. She has earned ownership, not as a reward, as payment for labor that was never properly compensated. Elena, I support you, but I want to make sure you are thinking clearly. You could give her a raise, a bonus, profit sharing. You do not have to give her half the company. I do if I want to actually change the power dynamic. Profit sharing is still charity. Ownership is power. I cannot ask women to trust me to change things if I am not willing to share power. And sharing power means sharing ownership. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You are right. Of course you are right. I just wanted to make sure this was thought through, not just an emotional response to tonight. It is both, an emotional response that I have thought through carefully. I am allowed to be both emotional and rational. You are allowed to be anything you want. They stood together in silence, watching the city light up the night. Somewhere below them, people were already sharing the story. The video was going viral. Elena had turned her phone off, but she knew how these things worked. By morning, millions of people would have watched her revelation, watched Victoria throw the caviar, watched her stand perfectly still and refuse to disappear. What do you think people will say? Elena asked. Some will call you brave, some will call you calculating, some will say you set Victoria up, that you manipulated the situation for publicity. There will be think pieces and hot takes and people who use your story to advance their own agendas. And you, what do you think? Marcus turned to face her. I think you are the most courageous person I have ever met. Not because you stood still when someone attacked you. Because you chose grace over revenge, transformation over destruction. Because you saw a woman who hurt you and decided to help her become better, rather than just punishing her for being broken. Elena felt tears building. She had been holding them back all night, being strong, being brave, but here, on the balcony with Marcus, she could let them fall. I am terrified, she whispered. What if I fail? What if the foundation does not work? What if making Rachel co-owner backfires? What if all of this was just one night of drama and nothing actually changes? Then you will have tried. That is more than most people do. What if trying is not enough? Then you try again and again until it works, or until you have given everything you have to give. That is all anyone can ask of you. That is all you can ask of yourself. Elena leaned against the railing, the cool metal pressed against her palms, grounding her, reminding her that she was here, now, in this moment, that she had survived, that she was alive to fight another day. Tomorrow is going to be chaos, she said. Probably. The press will be everywhere. People will want statements, interviews. They will want me to perform my trauma for their consumption. You do not have to perform anything. You can just be present, or you can hide, or you can do whatever you need to do to protect yourself. I need to meet with the staff, really meet with them, not as Amy, not as Elena the owner, as Elena the person who is trying to figure out how to be better. I need to listen to what they need. What would actually help? Not what I think would help. What they know would help. Then that is what you will do. Inside, her phone was still off. But she knew what was waiting when she turned it back on. Texts from friends who had not talked to her in years, suddenly eager to reconnect. Emails from journalists wanting exclusive interviews. Calls from competitors wondering how to capitalize on the story. Everyone wanting a piece of what had happened. But what had happened belonged to her. And to the women who had stood with her. And to the women who would come after. Who would see her story and understand that invisibility was not inevitable. That age was not a disease. That standing up was possible even when standing up meant standing still. I should call my staff, Elena said. Let them know what to expect tomorrow. Give them the option to not come in if they need space. They will come in, They will want to be part of whatever happens next. How do you know? Because you gave them something tonight that most people never get. You gave them the truth, and you gave them power. People do not walk away from that. They lean in. Elena picked up her phone, turned it on, watched as hundreds of notifications flooded the screen. Messages, emails, missed calls. The digital proof that the story was already bigger than her, already becoming something she could not control. She ignored all of it. Opened a group text to the Constellation staff, typed carefully. Tomorrow we meet at 10 a.m., not to work, to talk, to plan, to decide together what constellation becomes next. You are not required to attend. You are not required to participate, but you are invited. As partners, not employees. If you have childcare issues, bring your kids. If you need support, bring your people. This is our conversation, our future. See you tomorrow if you choose to come. She hit send, watched the message go through, wondered how many would actually show up, wondered if this was all too much too fast, wondered if she was asking people to trust her when she had spent 3 weeks lying to them. Within 30 seconds, responses started coming in. Rachel, I will be there. Thank you for seeing us. Margaret, would not miss it. This is what I have been waiting for my whole career. Sophia, my parents want to meet you. Can I bring them? They need to see that this life can be good. James, bringing my service dog if that is okay. Big crowds are hard, but this matters more. One by one, the staff responded. All of them yes. All of them committed. All of them ready to be part of whatever came next. Marcus watched her read the messages, saw the relief on her face. Told you. You were right. I usually am when it comes to people believing in you. Elena set the phone down, looked out at the city one more time. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably sitting alone in her apartment, processing everything that had happened, probably terrified, probably grieving, probably wondering if redemption was actually possible, or just a story people told themselves to feel better about their failures. Elena hoped Victoria would choose redemption, hoped she would do the work, go to therapy, make amends, become someone who helped instead of hurt. But she knew that hope was not enough, that Victoria had to choose it for herself, that no amount of grace from Elena could force transformation, that had to come from within. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, chaos or clarity, progress or setbacks, more questions than answers. But tonight, Elena Sterling was home, was safe, was surrounded by love, was no longer invisible. And that was enough. For now, that was enough. She turned to Marcus. Thank you for witnessing me tonight, for not trying to save me, for letting me save myself. You do not need to thank me for that, but you are welcome anyway. I love you. I do not say it enough, but I love you for understanding that love is not rescuing. It is standing beside someone while they figure out how to rescue themselves. I love you too, and I am proud of you. So proud, I do not have words for it. They went inside, left the city to its endless dance, left the story to spread however it would spread, left the future to unfold however it would unfold. Tomorrow they would fight. Tomorrow they would build. Tomorrow they would begin the hard work of turning one night of revelation into lasting change. But tonight, they rested. Tonight, they held each other. Tonight, they let themselves be human. The revolution would wait until morning, but morning was coming. And when it came, Elena Sterling would be ready. The invisible women were becoming unforgettable, and there was no going back from that. Morning came the way morning always comes after revolution, with light that feels too bright and a world that looks exactly the same despite everything having changed. Elena woke at 5:30, her body trained by decades of restaurant hours to rise before the sun. Marcus was still sleeping, his breathing deep and even, undisturbed by the storm that was surely building in the world beyond their bedroom. She dressed quietly, simple clothes, jeans, a sweater, no armor today, no costume, just herself. In the kitchen, she made coffee the old way, grinding beans by hand, heating water to exactly 200 degrees, pouring slowly in concentric circles over the grounds. The ritual calmed her, reminded her that some things required patience and precision, and could not be rushed no matter how urgent the world felt. While the coffee brewed, she finally turned on her phone. The screen lit up with notifications. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. The number kept climbing as the phone synchronized with reality. text messages, emails, missed calls, social media mentions, news alerts, the digital avalanche of a story that had already become bigger than her. She opened her news app first, needed to see how the story was being told before she could decide how to respond to it. The New York Post had gone predictably tabloid. The cover showed a still frame from someone's video. Elena standing at table 12, caviar dripping down her shirt, her face perfectly calm. The headline screamed in letters 3 inches tall, "Just desserts." Below it, "Snob critic gets served at billionaire's restaurant." The sub-headline was worse. "Food Nazi Victoria Harrington finally meets her match." The article inside was gleeful, mocking, treating the entire incident as entertainment rather than documentation of violence. They had found old victims of Victoria's reviews, quoted them celebrating her downfall, turned tragedy into spectacle. The Times was more measured but no less prominent. Front page above the fold, a photograph of Constellation's exterior, the windows glowing gold in the evening light. The headline, "Food critic suspended after assault allegation at Sterling restaurant." The article was careful, alleged assault, unnamed sources, balanced quotes from restaurant industry experts about the pressure critics face and the power dynamics at play. But buried in paragraph 12 was the real story. A quote from Martha Wellington, the retired prosecutor. "I witnessed a clear assault. Ms. Harrington struck Ms. Sterling with sufficient force to cause injury and humiliation. The fact that the weapon was caviar rather than a fist does not make it less violent. I have offered to represent Ms. Sterling pro bono because this case matters. It establishes whether powerful people are held accountable for assaulting service workers." The Wall Street Journal focused on the business angle. Billionaire's wife goes undercover, discovers age discrimination in own restaurant. They had somehow obtained Constellation's financial records. Reported that under David's management, the restaurant had saved $200,000 annually by favoring younger, less experienced staff who could be paid less. The piece was damning, made Elena look complicit in a system she claimed to oppose. She clicked through to social media. The tech entrepreneur's video had been viewed 23 million times now. 23 million. The number was incomprehensible. More people than lived in the entire state of New York had watched the worst moment of her life. The comments were a battlefield. She read them even though she knew she should not. Could not look away from the collective judgment of strangers. Some were supportive. "This is what courage looks like, standing perfectly still while someone attacks you and refusing to disappear. Every woman who has worked service has lived this. Thank you for making it visible. Elena Sterling is a hero, period." But others were vicious. "She set that poor woman up. This was a publicity stunt from the beginning. Rich people fighting while workers suffer. They are both trash. Victoria Harrington was just doing her job. Entitled billionaires cannot handle criticism. This is what happens when you give women power. They use it to destroy other women." The misogyny was casual, pervasive. Men who had never met either woman explaining what really happened. Telling Elena she should have moved, should have apologized, should have been more professional, as if professionalism required accepting assault with grace. But the most disturbing comments came from other women. "I love Victoria. She has standards. If servers cannot meet them, they should find other jobs. Elena Sterling is making it harder for the rest of us. Now every boss will think we are spying on them." Why do women always have to be victims? Just do your job and stop complaining. The internalized misogyny was everywhere. Women who had been taught that surviving abuse was a virtue, that accepting less was practical, that asking for dignity was entitlement. Elena closed the app before she could read more. She knew the pattern. For every supportive comment, there would be 3 critical ones. For every woman who saw herself in Elena's stand, there would be 5 who saw weakness. The internet was not designed for nuance. It was designed for outrage, and outrage always found a target. Elena closed the app, sipped her coffee, let the bitter warmth ground her. She had known this would happen, had understood that going public meant losing control of the narrative, that her story would be filtered through the biases and agendas of millions of strangers who would never know her, never understand the nuance, never see the full context. But she had done it anyway, because some stories needed to be told even when they would be misunderstood, because silence protected systems that needed to be challenged, because invisible women stayed invisible until someone chose to be seen. At 9:45, she arrived at Constellation. The street outside was already packed. News vans with satellite dishes, photographers with telephoto lenses, reporters doing stand-ups in front of the restaurant's entrance, a small crowd of onlookers, phones out, hoping to catch a glimpse of something newsworthy. Security had already established a perimeter. Marcus had hired additional staff overnight, former Secret Service agents who knew how to create space without creating confrontation. They guided Elena through the crowd with professional efficiency. "Mrs. Sterling, do you regret going undercover?" "Mrs. Sterling, are you pressing charges?" "Mrs. Sterling, was this all a publicity stunt?" She did not answer, did not engage, just walked through the gauntlet with her head up and her expression neutral, giving them nothing, giving them everything. Inside, the restaurant felt different, the same physical space but transformed by intention. The tables had been pushed aside, creating an open area. Chairs arranged in a circle, not rows. No hierarchy, no front or back, just a gathering space. The staff was already there. All of them. Not just the people who had been present last night, but everyone who worked at Constellation. The morning prep cooks who started at 4 a.m., the night porters who cleaned until 2, the bookkeeper who came in twice a week, the maintenance workers who kept the building running. 47 people total, every single person who made Constellation function. And with them, their families. Rachel's 2 daughters, teenagers with their mother's eyes and their own fierce intelligence. Margaret's husband, a retired schoolteacher, who looked at his wife with the kind of pride that came from decades of supporting someone the world underestimated. Sophia's parents, immigrants who had built a life from nothing and wanted something safer for their daughter, but were starting to understand that safety and passion were not always opposing forces. James had brought his service dog, a golden retriever named Apollo, who sat at his feet with the calm attentiveness of a trained professional. The dog wore a vest that said, "Do not pet," working. But children gravitated toward him anyway, drawn to the gentle energy. Elena stood at the edge of the circle, not entering it yet, waiting. Marcus appeared at her shoulder. "They are all here," he said quietly. "Every single person you invited. And they brought their people, their support systems, their witnesses. This is what community looks like." "I am terrified." "Good, that means it matters." Elena stepped into the circle. The conversation quieted. All eyes turned to her. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice was steady but not loud, conversational, intimate. "I know you all have questions. I know the last 12 hours have been chaotic and confusing. I know some of you are angry at me for lying. Some of you are scared about what comes next. All of that is valid. All of that deserves space." She looked around the circle, made eye contact with each person, acknowledged them individually. "I went undercover because I needed to understand what I had built. Not what I thought I had built, what I actually built. And what I learned is that I created a system that looked beautiful on the surface, but was broken at its foundation. A system that valued perfection over humanity, youth over experience, profit over people. I am responsible for that, and I am committed to fixing it." Rachel raised her hand tentatively. "What does fixing it actually mean? Like, practically, not just words. What changes?" Elena had been preparing for this question. "It means we rebuild the structure of how Constellation operates, starting with leadership. I am offering you 50% equity in this restaurant, full partnership, equal decision-making power, not as a reward, as recognition that you have been doing the work of an owner while being paid as an employee." The circle went absolutely silent. Rachel's face showed shock, disbelief, hope, fear all at once. "I cannot afford to buy in," Rachel said quietly. "You already bought in, with years of underpaid labor, with staying when you should have been able to leave, with giving this place your excellence while David gave you scraps. This is not me being generous. This is me paying what I should have paid all along." Rachel was crying. Her daughters were crying. Margaret reached over and squeezed Rachel's hand. "It means restructuring how we pay everyone," Elena continued. "Transparent salaries, no more secret negotiations, no more wondering if the person next to you makes more for the same work. Equal pay for equal work regardless of age or gender or how good you are at asking for raises. Sophia spoke up. What about scheduling? David used to deny every request for time off, every parent-teacher conference, every doctor appointment. He said if we could not commit fully, we should work somewhere else. Flexible scheduling becomes standard. You have lives outside this restaurant. Children, parents, health needs, education. Those are not inconveniences to be managed. Those are realities to be accommodated. We figure out how to make the restaurant work around your lives instead of demanding your lives work around the restaurant. An older woman Elena did not recognize raised her hand. She was sitting next to one of the porters, holding his hand. I am Maria's wife, she said in accented English. Maria, he clean here 2 years. You know his name? Elena felt shame burn in her chest. I am sorry, I do not. Exactly, he invisible. He clean your floors, take out your trash, make beautiful what you need beautiful. But you do not know his name. How you fix that? Maria, the porter, tried to quiet his wife, but she shook her head. No, she asked what fix. I tell her. You want fix invisible, you learn names, you see people, not just front, everybody. Elena walked to where they sat, extended her hand. You are right. My name is Elena. What is yours? Carmen. And your husband? Maria Rodriguez. Maria Rodriguez, I am sorry I did not know your name before. That changes today. Will you tell me about your work, what you need? What would make your job better? Maria looked stunned. In 2 years, no one had ever asked. He began to speak, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence, about the cleaning supplies that irritated his skin, about the schedule that had him working alone at night when it was dangerous, about the lack of respect from servers who treated him like furniture. Elena listened, really listened, pulled out her phone and took notes, not performative, genuine documentation of problems that needed solving. When Maria finished, she looked around the circle. Anyone else? Any problem, any need, any idea? I want to hear it. Not so I can defend what exists, so I can understand what needs to change. For the next 2 hours, they talked, not a speech from Elena, but a conversation, a real one, with disagreement and challenge and honesty. James talked about needing a quiet space for when the kitchen noise became too much, when the PTSD flared and he needed 10 minutes of silence to reset. Margaret talked about the dress code that required high heels, about how her feet ached after 8-hour shifts, about how heels were coded as professional while flat shoes were coded as giving up. The prep cooks talked about starting at 4 a.m. but not being allowed to eat the food they prepared, about being hungry while surrounded by abundance. The dishwashers talked about burning their hands on water that was too hot because the temperature controls were broken and no one had fixed them for months. One by one, people who had been invisible spoke, and one by one, Elena wrote down what they said. By noon, she had 6 pages of notes, concrete problems with concrete solutions, some easy, some expensive, all necessary. Here is what I propose, Elena said. We close for 1 week. Not for punishment, for renovation, physical and cultural. We fix the broken equipment. We redesign the spaces that do not work. We rewrite the employee handbook together. Not me dictating, us negotiating. And we train everyone on the new policies, the new expectations, the new culture. When we reopen as something different, something better. Are you willing to try? The vote was unanimous, 47 people choosing transformation over comfort, choosing the risk of change over the certainty of continued harm. As the meeting broke up, Sophia approached with her parents. They looked nervous, uncertain. Her mother was small, elegant, with the kind of beauty that came from strength rather than softness. Her father was tall, serious, with hands that showed a lifetime of manual labor. Mrs. Sterling, Sophia said, these are my parents. They wanted to meet you. Sophia's mother spoke first. Her English was careful, practiced. I tell Sophia be doctor, safe job, respect. But she want cook. I say no. Too hard. Too mean, she cry. I say no more. Elena waited. Let the woman find her words. Last night, I watch video. I see you stand. I see you not cry. I see you powerful. And I think maybe I wrong. Maybe cooking can be good if people like you make it good. Her father added, we immigrant, we work hard. We want Sophia have easier. But maybe easier is not better. Maybe passion is better. Sophia was crying again, happy tears this time. Elena looked at Sophia's parents. Your daughter is exceptional. She has talent and work ethic and emotional intelligence. She will be a great chef, not because it is easy, because she loves it enough to do it even when it is hard. And I promise you, I will do everything I can to make this industry worthy of her dedication. Sophia's mother hugged Elena, a fierce, tight embrace. You take care, my baby. I will, I promise. 3 months later, the changes were visible, tangible, real. Constellation had reopened with its new structure in place. Rachel as co-owner, her name on the legal documents, her signature on the bank accounts. Margaret as head sommelier with a salary that reflected her expertise. Sophia as dining room manager, the youngest person ever to hold that title, earning it through competence, not appearance. The employee handbook had been completely rewritten. 28 pages of clear policies, transparent procedures, and enforceable protections. Every staff member had a copy. Many had it framed in their lockers like a declaration of independence. The physical changes were everywhere. A quiet room off the kitchen where anyone could go when overstimulated, ergonomic floor mats in the dish pit, new temperature controls on the sinks, a staff meal policy that treated food as a right, not a privilege. Lockers big enough for people's actual belongings instead of the tiny boxes that assumed workers owned nothing. But the real changes were harder to photograph. They lived in the way people moved through the space, with their heads up instead of down, with questions instead of silent compliance, with the confidence that came from being valued. The staff turnover, which had been running at 70% annually under David's management, dropped to 8%. People stayed, people thrived. People told their friends that Constellation was hiring and those friends should apply. The reviews reflected the shift. Critics noticed that the service had changed, not worse, different, more genuine, less performative. Servers who smiled because they were happy instead of because they were required to. Elena spent those 3 months learning to share power. It was harder than she expected. She was used to making decisions alone, to trusting her own judgment above all others, to being the smartest person in the room. But Rachel was smart too, often smarter, especially about people. And when they disagreed about hiring decisions or menu changes, or how to handle difficult guests, Elena had to practice something she had never been good at: compromise, collaboration, trusting that two perspectives were better than one, even when that meant letting go of control. Victoria spent those 3 months in court-ordered therapy and community service. She had pled guilty to assault, accepted 100 hours of community service teaching food safety at a culinary program for women over 40 who were starting second careers. The program was held in a converted church basement in Brooklyn, the kind of space that had seen 1,000 transformations, youth groups and AA meetings and community dinners. Now it hosted women who had been teachers and accountants and nurses and were learning to be chefs. Elena had visited once, on a Tuesday morning when Victoria was teaching knife skills. She slipped in through the back door, stood against the wall where the shadows were deep enough to hide in. There were 12 women in the class. The youngest was 41. The oldest was 63. They wore donated chef's whites that did not quite fit, used knives from a restaurant supply store that was going out of business, worked on cutting boards scarred by years of use. But they were focused, intent, hungry for knowledge in a way that came from having tried other paths and found them wanting. Victoria stood at the front, demonstrating proper knife grip. Her hands were steady. Her voice was clear. She explained the importance of the pinch grip, the rocking motion, the way the knife should feel like an extension of your hand rather than a tool you were fighting. The blade does the work, she said. Your job is to guide it, not force it. If you are forcing, you are doing it wrong. One student, a Black woman in her 50s, raised her hand. Ms. Harrington, I have arthritis in my hands. The grip hurts. Is there another way? Victoria's face flickered. Elena saw it. The old instinct to snap, to say that if you could not do it right, you should not do it at all, to dismiss the question as proof of inadequacy. But then Victoria took a breath, paused, chose differently. Yes, there are adaptive techniques. Let me show you. She walked to the woman's station, adjusted her grip to accommodate the joint pain, showed her how to use a lighter knife, how to take breaks, how to work with her body instead of against it. Cooking is not about suffering, Victoria said quietly. I used to think it was. I used to think that if it did not hurt, you were not trying hard enough. But that is wrong. That is the lie we tell ourselves to justify cruelty. Good cooking comes from understanding, from adaptation, from meeting people where they are. The students watched this interaction with visible relief. They had been expecting the Victoria from the reviews, the harsh critic who found fault in everything. But this woman was different. Struggling, yes, not perfect, but trying. After the demonstration, the students practiced. Victoria moved between stations, offering corrections that were firm but not cruel, praise that was genuine but not excessive. She was learning how to teach, how to give feedback that built up instead of tore down. But Elena saw the cost, saw Victoria's hands trembling when she thought no one was looking, saw her step outside twice during the 2-hour class, needing a moment alone to breathe, saw the exhaustion in her face that came from fighting your own instincts every single second. After class, they talked briefly in the hallway. The students had left. The space was empty except for the two of them. "How is it going?" Elena asked. "Hard." Victoria leaned against the wall, suddenly looking every one of her 55 years. "Every day I want to be cruel, every single day. Some student makes a mistake and I want to destroy them for it. Want to tell them they are wasting everyone's time, that they should give up and go back to whatever safe, boring job they left, that they will never be good enough. But you do not say those things." "No, I do not. But I think them, and thinking them feels almost as bad as saying them, because I know where they come from. They come from hating myself, from seeing in their struggles my own failures, from wanting to punish them for having hope when I have none." Elena did not offer platitudes, did not tell Victoria it would get easier. She did not know if that was true. "The woman with arthritis," Elena said. "How did it feel to help her instead of dismissing her?" Victoria considered. "Strange, uncomfortable, but also good. Like I was being someone I had forgotten I could be, someone who builds instead of destroys. I do not know if I can sustain it, if I can be that person every day for the rest of my life. But today, I was. And maybe that is enough. Maybe that is all any of us can do. Be better today than we were yesterday. Repeat tomorrow." Victoria looked at her with something like wonder. "How are you not angry at me still? I assaulted you, tried to humiliate you. You should hate me." "I am angry at you sometimes, late at night when I cannot sleep, and I remember what it felt like to have caviar thrown at me, when I see comments online calling me weak for not fighting back, when I wonder if I made the right choice offering you grace. Yes, I am angry." "Then why help me?" "Because anger is not the only thing I feel. I also feel hope. Hope that people can change, that pain can be transformed, that you can become someone different. And I want to live in a world where that hope is justified. So I act as if it is, even when I am not sure." They stood in the quiet hallway, two women who had hurt each other learning how to exist in the same world. "My therapist says I need to make amends," Victoria said, "to the people I hurt before you, the careers I destroyed. She says I need to reach out, apologize, try to repair what I broke. Are you going to?" "I do not know how. What do you say to someone whose life you ruined? Sorry feels obscene, inadequate, insulting." "You say sorry anyway. And then you ask what they need. And then you do the work of providing it if you can. Amends are not about making yourself feel better. They are about trying to make the other person whole." Victoria nodded slowly. "I made a list. 17 names, 17 people I need to contact. Every time I look at it, I feel sick. But I am going to do it, one name at a time. Because you are right. This is not about me feeling better. This is about trying to repair what I broke." 6 months after the caviar incident, the documentary premiered. Netflix had moved fast, shot footage at Constellation during the renovation, interviewed staff, critics, industry experts, woven together a narrative that was both specific to Elena's story and universal to every woman who had been made invisible by systems designed to erase her. The premiere was held at a small theater in Tribeca, not a Hollywood spectacle, but an intimate gathering. Elena had insisted on that. This was not entertainment. This was documentation, witness, truth-telling. The staff attended, all of them, dressed not in uniforms but in their own clothes, their own choices, their own expressions of who they were when they were not performing for guests. Elena sat between Marcus and Rachel, held both their hands as the lights went down and the screen lit up with the opening image. Her own face, 3 weeks into going undercover, exhaustion visible in her eyes, but determination too. The documentary was 90 minutes long. It started with Elena's decision to go undercover, showed footage from the hidden cameras she had worn, the casual cruelties of daily service, Margaret being called grandmother, James being screamed at for being too slow, Rachel being denied time off for her daughter's birthday. Then the caviar incident, multiple angles, the slow motion horror of it, Victoria's face showing rage and pain, Elena's face showing calm and resolve, the revelation, the speech, the transformation. But the documentary did not stop there. It followed the aftermath, the staff meetings, the policy changes, the learning curve. Rachel's struggle with imposter syndrome when she suddenly owned half of a multi-million-dollar business. Sophia's parents slowly understanding that their daughter's passion was legitimate. Margaret finally being seen as the expert she had always been. And Victoria. The documentary spent significant time on Victoria's story. Her daughter's death, her grief, her transformation from victim to perpetrator, her slow, painful journey towards something different. When the credits rolled, there was silence in the theater. Then applause, not polite, thunderous, people standing, crying, holding each other. Elena felt overwhelmed. This was her story, their story. But seeing it reflected back, edited and scored and narrated, made it feel bigger than herself. Made her understand that what had started as a personal reckoning had become something else. A movement, a shift, a crack in the foundation of how an entire industry operated. After the screening, there was a panel discussion. Elena, Rachel, Margaret, and surprisingly, Victoria. The moderator was a well-known journalist who specialized in labor issues. Elena, the journalist asked, "Do you regret going undercover? Some critics have said it was manipulative, that you set Victoria up." Elena had been preparing for this question for months. "I do not regret learning the truth about what I had built. Do I wish I had learned it differently? Yes, but I tried the traditional ways, staff surveys, suggestion boxes, open-door policies. None of it worked because people do not tell the truth to power when power can punish them for honesty. I needed to not be power, even temporarily, even artificially, to understand what power was doing." "Rachel," the journalist turned to her, "how did you feel when you learned Amy was actually Elena?" Rachel considered. "Betrayed at first, like I had been lied to. But then I realized she had not been lying about the things that mattered, about seeing us, about caring, about wanting to fix what was broken. The deception was about her identity, but the connection was real." "Margaret, you have worked in restaurants for 30 years. Do you think this will actually change the industry?" Margaret smiled. "It already has. I get calls every week from servers at other restaurants asking how we did it, asking for copies of our handbook, wanting to know how to convince their owners to change. The constellation model is spreading, slowly, but it is spreading." The journalist turned to Victoria. "You are the villain in this story for many people. How do you respond to that?" Victoria did not flinch. "I am the villain in this story. I assaulted someone. I destroyed careers. I weaponized my pain against innocent people. The fact that I was grieving does not excuse that. The fact that I am trying to change does not erase it. I have to live with being the villain. And I have to prove through years of different choices that villains can become something else." What would you say to the women you hurt, the careers you damaged? "I am sorry. It is inadequate, but it is true. And I am working to make amends. Not through words, but through action, teaching, mentoring, using my knowledge to help instead of hurt. I cannot undo what I did, but I can do something different going forward." The audience response was mixed. Some people sympathetic, some still angry, but everyone listening. Everyone grappling with the complexity of it. After the panel, people approached Elena, strangers who wanted to tell her their own stories, servers who had been humiliated, chefs who had been discriminated against because of their age, women who had left the industry because the cruelty became unbearable. One woman, probably in her late 50s, took Elena's hands and said simply, "Thank you for showing me I am not crazy, for proving that the system is broken, not us." That moment made everything worth it. The chaos, the criticism, the loss of privacy. All of it was worth that one woman's relief at being validated. But not everyone was supportive. The backlash came in waves. Conservative media ran segments about how Elena was destroying the restaurant industry with her woke politics. how demanding dignity for workers would drive up prices and put restaurants out of business, how she was punishing men to benefit women, how this was all just another example of cancel culture run amok. Some male chefs spoke out against the Constellation model, said it coddled workers, that the industry had always been tough, and if you could not handle it, you should find a different career. That participation trophies in the kitchen would lead to mediocrity. But the most personal attack came 9 months after the incident. A male chef, Andre Rousseau, 48 years old with a Michelin-starred restaurant of his own, applied for the head chef position at Constellation. The role Keisha Washington had been hired for 6 months earlier. He was qualified, experienced, talented. Under normal circumstances, he would have been a strong candidate. But Keisha was more qualified, more experienced, better suited to Constellation's culture. And when Elena and Rachel chose Keisha, Andre sued. The lawsuit claimed discrimination, that Constellation had a pattern of preferring women over men, that Elena's public statements about elevating women created a hostile environment for male applicants, that he had been denied the position solely because of his gender. The media jumped on it. "Is Elena Sterling a hypocrite?" screamed the headlines. "Does equality mean no men?" The lawsuit threatened everything Elena had built, not just legally, but narratively. It gave ammunition to everyone who wanted to discredit the movement, who wanted to prove that advocating for women meant discriminating against men. Elena sat in her lawyer's office, reading the complaint, feeling the weight of it settle on her shoulders. "This is bad," Lawrence Hayes said. He did not sugarcoat. That was why she paid him. "If we lose, it sets a precedent that equality initiatives are legally vulnerable. Every restaurant that tries to fix gender imbalance becomes a target. And if we settle, we look guilty, like we were discriminating and got caught. So we fight. We fight, but Elena, you need to understand this will be ugly. They will depose you, Rachel, Keisha. They will go through every hiring decision, every personnel file, looking for patterns. Your personal life, your marriage, your finances, everything becomes fair game." Elena looked at Marcus, who had come to the meeting for support. "What do you think?" "I think you did not come this far to back down now, but I also think you need to be prepared for how much this will cost, not financially, emotionally." She was already so tired. 9 months of fighting, of defending every choice, of explaining over and over that giving women opportunities was not the same as taking opportunities from men, of living in the public eye where every decision was scrutinized and every mistake was magnified. Some days she wanted to walk away, sell Constellation, disappear, let someone else carry the weight of trying to change an industry that did not want to change. But then she thought about Maria, the porter who was finally seen, about Rachel's daughters watching their mother own a business, about Sophia's parents learning to support their daughter's dreams, about all the women who had written to say thank you for proving invisible could become unforgettable. "We fight," Elena said. "We present the evidence, Keisha's superior qualifications, Andre's history of harassment complaints at previous restaurants, the fact that we hire based on merit, not gender, and merit meant choosing her." The lawsuit took 3 months to resolve. 3 months of depositions and document review and media coverage. 3 months of having her integrity questioned daily. But the evidence was clear. Keisha had better credentials, more experience in the specific cuisines Constellation served, glowing references, while Andre had 5 HR complaints for creating hostile work environments for women. The judge dismissed the lawsuit, ruled that hiring a more qualified candidate was not discrimination regardless of gender. But the damage lingered. The narrative that Elena was anti-male had been planted. Conservative media ignored the dismissal. The headlines "lawsuit dismissed" got 1/100th the coverage of lawsuit filed. Elena learned a hard truth, that doing the right thing did not protect you from attack, that building something better meant becoming a target for everyone invested in keeping things the same. That revolution was not a moment, but a war of attrition. She also learned she was stronger than she thought, that she could withstand scrutiny, criticism, legal threats, that she could keep going even when exhausted, even when discouraged, even when the voice in her head said it would be easier to give up. 12 months after the caviar incident, Constellation held a private anniversary dinner. The restaurant was closed to the public, the tables pushed together to create one long surface running the length of the dining room, 47 place settings, one for every staff member. At the head of the table, not elevated but simply positioned at the end, sat Elena and Marcus. To their right, Rachel and her daughters. To their left, Margaret and her husband. Down the line, every person who made Constellation function. And at the far end, a single empty chair, set with a plate and glass, a place of honor for those who were missing. For Sophie, Victoria's daughter, whose death had started a chain of pain that led to this moment. For Elena's mother, whose unfinished work had inspired this journey. Victoria had been invited, but had declined, not out of bitterness, but out of respect. This was for the people who had done the daily work of transformation. She was still earning her place in that community. Elena stood, raised her glass. The room quieted. 1 year ago tonight, I stood where you are sitting, covered in caviar, humiliated and angry. I thought I had discovered failure, that my restaurant was broken beyond repair, that I had created something beautiful that was rotten at its core. She looked around the table, 47 faces looking back at her. But what I actually discovered was you, your strength, your resilience, your refusal to accept that the way things were was the way things had to be. You taught me that excellence and humanity are not opposites, that dignity is not a luxury, that invisible women are only invisible because we choose not to see them. Margaret raised her glass. To Elena, for choosing to see. No, Elena said gently. To us, for choosing to be seen, for refusing to stay invisible, for doing the hard work of building something better. This is not my victory, this is ours. The toast was unanimous, 47 voices saying together, to us. They ate. Not a formal service, but a family meal. Dishes passed hand to hand. Conversation flowing freely. Children running between tables. Apollo, James's service dog, accepting gentle pets from people who had earned his trust. This was what Constellation had become. Not a temple to perfection, but a home for human beings doing their best work because they were supported, valued, seen. After dinner, as people lingered over coffee and dessert, Rachel stood. I want to say something, she said. A year ago, I was a single mother working 3 jobs, barely surviving. I thought that was all I would ever be. Someone grinding through days, stealing moments with my daughters, living for a future that felt impossible to reach. Her voice broke, her daughters held her hands. Elena gave me ownership, gave me power, gave me a future I had stopped believing in. But more than that, she gave me something I did not even know I needed. She gave me the understanding that I was not failing, that the system was failing me, that asking for dignity was not weakness. It was strength. She looked at Elena. You changed my life, but you also changed my daughters' lives. They see their mother as an owner now, as powerful, as worthy. That changes what they believe is possible for themselves. That is legacy. That is revolution. Sophia stood next. I am 23 now, 1 year older than I was when this started, and everything is different. My parents support my career. I am managing a dining room at a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. I am making enough money to help support them instead of them supporting me. But the biggest change is internal. I believe I belong here. I believe my expertise matters. I believe age is not expiration, because I see Margaret thriving at 57. I see Elena powerful at 43. I see what is possible. One by one, people stood, shared what had changed, what they had learned, what they carried forward. When everyone had spoken who wanted to speak, Elena stood for the last time. Tomorrow, we go back to regular service, back to the daily work of running a restaurant. Some days will be hard. We will make mistakes. We will disagree. We will struggle. This is not a fairy tale. This is real life, and real life is messy. She paused. Let the truth of that settle. But we will do it together, as partners, as a community, as people who believe that the way we treat each other matters as much as the food we serve. And when we mess up because we will fix it, learn from it, do better the next time. She raised her glass one final time. To invisible women who became unforgettable, to everyone who had the courage to stand up, to sit down, to stay in the room even when the room wanted them gone. To you, to us, to the revolution that happens one day at a time. The glasses clinked, the voices rose, the celebration continued into the night. Outside, the city glowed. Inside, something new had been born, not perfect, but better, not finished, but begun. Elena Sterling had stopped being invisible, but more importantly, she had helped others see their own visibility, their own worth, their own power. The revolution was not over, it was just beginning, and she was ready. 5 years is long enough to build a life, long enough to watch children grow taller, long enough to see movements become institutions, long enough to understand whether revolution was real or just a moment of collective emotion that faded when the cameras turned away. Elena Sterling stood in the kitchen of her upstate farmhouse, teaching her daughter how to make pasta. Not the daughter she had chosen not to have at 25 or 30 or 35. The daughter she had chosen to have at 44, when she finally understood that choosing work over motherhood and choosing both were not mutually exclusive, that women were allowed to change their minds, to want different things at different stages, to evolve. The kitchen was filled with morning light, golden autumn sun streaming through windows that overlooked fields turning amber and rust. The counter was covered in flour, dusted like snow across the dark granite. Small handprints marked where Lily had been working, evidence of presence, proof of participation. Lily was 3 years old, adopted from foster care at 18 months. A child who had already learned that the world was not safe, that adults disappeared, that love was conditional. Teaching her to trust again had been the hardest thing Elena had ever done. Harder than building a restaurant, harder than going undercover, harder than standing still while someone threw caviar at her face. The first 6 months had been brutal. Lily had screamed when Elena left the room, had hoarded food in her pockets, convinced scarcity was coming, had flinched when people moved too quickly, had tested every boundary, waiting for the inevitable moment when Elena would give up and send her away. But Elena had not given up, had held her through tantrums, had reassured her through nightmares, had shown up every single day with the same steady love until Lily finally, tentatively, began to believe it might be permanent. Now, watching Lily's small hands press the pasta dough, seeing her face light up when the cutter made perfect shapes, feeling her lean against Elena's leg with the unconscious affection of a child who had finally learned that this mother would not leave, that made every hard moment worth it. Like this, Mama? Lily held up a slightly misshapen star, 1 point longer than the others, the center off balance. Exactly like that, perfect. But it is crooked. Lily frowned, turning the pasta star in her small fingers, examining the flaw. Perfect things are boring. Interesting things have character. See how this point is longer? That makes it special, unique, yours. Lily considered this. Elena could see her processing, learning that imperfection was not failure, that handmade meant variations, that character was more valuable than conformity. These were lessons Elena was teaching her daughter, lessons Elena had learned too late, lessons she hoped would shape Lily into someone who did not spend 40 years trying to be perfect before learning to be human. Marcus came in from the garden, dirt under his fingernails, tomatoes in a basket. At 48, he had silver in his beard now, lines around his eyes that came from laughter more than stress. He moved with the easy grace of someone who had stopped trying to prove anything, who had learned to value peace over power. He had stepped back from day-to-day operations at Sterling Tech 2 years ago, handed leadership to someone younger and hungrier, kept only the projects that excited him, the ones about sustainability and education, and using technology to solve problems that mattered. He made less money now, did not care, had more life. That trade felt worthwhile. He kissed Elena's forehead, ruffled Lily's hair, gentle, knowing she still sometimes startled at unexpected touch. Making pasta? Making art, Lily corrected, echoing what Elena had told her. Mama says cooking is art. Mama is right. And what kind of art are we making? Stars. Because stars are beautiful and they have points that are different. Marcus caught Elena's eye, a look of understanding, of shared pride in this child they were raising, in the small moments of teaching and learning, in the ordinary magic of family. They had bought this farmhouse 3 years ago, 2 hours north of the city, far enough to breathe, close enough to return when needed. The house itself was old, built in 1870, with wide plank floors and a stone fireplace, and windows that rattled in winter storms. They had renovated slowly, carefully, preserving character while adding function. The barn had been converted into a test kitchen, where Elena experimented with recipes and taught occasional cooking classes. Local women, mostly, from the surrounding towns. Women who wanted to learn technique, who wanted to understand that cooking could be art, who wanted an afternoon away from their lives to create something beautiful with their hands. The garden Marcus tended produced more vegetables than they could eat. He preserved them, canned tomatoes and pickled cucumbers, and made jams from berries, shared the excess with neighbors, traded surplus for eggs from the farm down the road, lived in a local economy of mutual care. The quiet was profound. No sirens, no crowds, no constant noise of a city that never slept. Instead, birds in the morning, wind in the trees, the occasional sound of a tractor in distant fields, rain on the metal roof, Lily's laughter echoing through rooms. Elena still owned Constellation, still visited weekly, still advised on major decisions. But Rachel ran it now, really ran it, made choices Elena disagreed with sometimes, and proved those choices right. Hired people Elena would not have hired who became invaluable. Built something that was recognizably Constellation, but also distinctly Rachel's vision. Learning to let go had been its own education. Learning to trust that something could be both hers and not hers. That legacy was not about control, but about planting seeds and letting them grow in directions you could not predict. That the best thing she could give the restaurant was her absence, her trust, her permission for it to evolve beyond her. Some mornings she still woke anxious, wanting to call Rachel and check on things, wanting to review financial reports and staff schedules and menu changes. The old instinct to control everything died slowly, reluctantly, with protest. The test kitchen phone rang, the landline they kept for work calls. Elena wiped flour from her hands and answered. Elena Sterling. Elena, it is Victoria. 5 years later, and Victoria's voice still carried weight, still made Elena's body remember the caviar, the cold, the humiliation, the choice to stand still. Some memories lived in the body even after the mind had processed them. But there was warmth in Victoria's voice now, the tentative warmth of someone who had done years of hard work and was finally starting to believe she might deserve connection. Victoria, how are you? Good. Tired, but good. I am calling because I finished the list, all 17 names. The last apology was this morning. Elena sat down. This was significant. Victoria had been working through her amends for 5 years, reaching out to every person she had hurt professionally. Some had accepted her apology. Some had told her to never contact them again. Some had needed financial restitution for lost income. Some had just needed to be heard, to have their pain acknowledged, to know that what happened to them mattered. How do you feel? Like I have been carrying a weight for so long I forgot it was there. And now it is gone, and I do not know how to walk without it. That is called freedom. It is terrifying. Yes, freedom usually is. They talked for a few more minutes. About Victoria's work at the culinary school, which had become permanent employment rather than community service. About her daughter, adopted at 57 from a different kind of grief. About the book she was writing, a memoir about cruelty and redemption that was honest about both. When Elena hung up, Marcus was watching her. She finished her amends. Good, that is good. You never liked her. I liked what she became. I did not like what she was. There is a difference. Do you think people can really change? Or do they just learn to hide their worst parts better? Marcus considered. I think some people can change. Not everyone. Not even most people. But some. And Victoria is one of the some. I have watched her over 5 years. Watched her choose kindness when cruelty would be easier. Watched her rebuild herself from scratch. That is real change. I hope you are right. I am right. Not because I am optimistic, because I have seen the evidence. That afternoon, Elena drove into the city for the monthly Constellation Board meeting. The restaurant had expanded. 3 locations now, Manhattan, Brooklyn, and 1 in Chicago, all operating under the same model. All worker-owned cooperatives where staff held equity. All profitable. The model had proven that dignity and success were not opposites, that treating people well did not destroy businesses, that the old way of running restaurants, grinding workers until they broke and then replacing them, was not just cruel, but inefficient. The board meeting was held in the private dining room of the original Constellation. Rachel chaired it, sat at the head of the table with the easy confidence of someone who had earned her position through years of excellent work. Around the table sat the leadership team. Margaret, now head of beverage programs across all 3 locations. Sophia, director of operations. Only 28 years old, but commanding respect through competence. Keisha, corporate executive chef, overseeing menu development and kitchen culture. James, in charge of staff wellness programs, using his experience with PTSD to create support systems for others. And at the far end, new faces, younger people, a line cook from Brooklyn who had revolutionary ideas about sustainability, a former server from Chicago who understood logistics in ways that would have taken Elena years to learn, the next generation, already building on the foundation. Elena sat as senior advisor, not silent but not dominant, offering perspective when asked, staying quiet when not. Watching these people she had helped empower now exercising that power with wisdom and courage. Rachel presented the financial report. Revenue up 18% year over year. Staff retention at 94%. Almost unheard of in an industry where most people left within 18 months. Applications for positions outnumbering openings 10 to 1. People wanted to work at Constellation, not despite its policies, but because of them. The Chicago location is ready to transition to full worker ownership, Rachel said. Staff have completed the training program, understand the financial responsibilities, are ready to buy in. I propose we execute the transfer next quarter. The vote was unanimous. Then Sophia presented something new. We have been approached by the Restaurant Workers Union. They want to partner on a national training program, teaching other restaurants how to implement the Constellation model. They are offering funding, resources, platform, but they want our expertise, our time, our endorsement. The room went quiet. This was bigger than Constellation. This was about changing an entire industry, about scaling what had started as one woman's reckoning into a movement that could transform millions of lives. Elena watched the younger members of the board process this, saw their excitement, their fear, their understanding that saying yes meant committing to something larger than themselves. "What do you think, Elena?" Rachel asked. All eyes turned to her. She was being asked not as owner, but as the person who had started this, the one who had stood still when violence came, the one who had chosen grace over revenge, the one whose story had become legend. "I think," Elena said carefully, "that this is what we have been building toward. Not just making our restaurants better, making all restaurants better, but it will be hard, it will take time, and it will mean exposing ourselves to criticism from people who do not want change." "We have been criticized before," James said quietly. "We survived it. We are still here." "Then I think we should say yes, but not just as Constellation, as individuals choosing to be part of something bigger. No one is required to participate. This is volunteer work on top of your regular jobs. It is a lot to ask." Sophia spoke up. "Some things are worth being asked to do. This is one of them." The vote was unanimous again. After the meeting, Elena walked through the dining room with Rachel. It was between services, the quiet time when the space belonged to the staff. A few servers were having family meal together. A couple of line cooks were testing a new dish. Apollo, James's service dog, was getting scratches from the hostess. Everything looked the same as it had 5 years ago. The tables, the lighting, the view. But everything felt different. The energy was different, lighter, freer. People laughed more, moved with confidence rather than fear, took pride in their work because the work honored them. "Do you ever miss it?" Rachel asked. "Running everything, being in control." "Sometimes. Late at night when I cannot sleep, I think about all the decisions you are making without me, all the ways you are changing things I built, and I panic a little. And then I remember that the point was never for me to control Constellation forever. The point was to build something worth continuing. You are continuing it, making it better. That is legacy, that is success." They stood by the window overlooking the city, the same view that had been here 5 years ago when Elena was still invisible, when she thought perfection was the goal, when she had not yet learned that humanity was more important than flawlessness. "I am pregnant," Rachel said suddenly. Elena turned to her. "What?" 3 months. I have not told anyone yet. I am terrified. I already have 2 teenagers. I am 43 years old. I run 3 restaurants. I do not have time for a baby. I do not have energy for a baby. I do not know if I can do this. Elena took her hands. You do not have to do this alone. That is what we built here. Community, support, systems that allow people to be both professionals and parents. You created those systems. Now you get to use them. What if I fail? What if I cannot be a good mother and a good leader? You will fail at something. We all do. But you will also succeed at something, and you will teach your child that women can be complicated, can want multiple things, can build multiple lives. That is a gift. Rachel started crying. I did not know I wanted this until I found out I was pregnant. I thought I was done with babies. But now I cannot imagine not having this child. Is that crazy? No, that is being human. We are allowed to change, to want different things, to evolve. They hugged, 2 women who had started as owner and employee, who had become partners, who were now friends, who had built something together that was bigger than either of them alone. That evening, Elena attended the annual gala for the Elena Sterling Foundation for Women in Culinary Arts. 5 years old, $50 million in assets now, grown from the initial $10 million through donations and smart investments. 2,000 scholarships awarded, legal aid for 300 discrimination cases, mental health services for 5,000 restaurant workers. 3 culinary schools built in underserved communities. The numbers were staggering, but numbers could not capture what those scholarships meant. The woman who left an abusive marriage at 48 and found dignity through culinary training. The 60-year-old grandmother who finally pursued the dream she had deferred for everyone else. The 52-year-old laid off from corporate America who discovered she could feed people and feed herself. Each number was a life changed, a future created. A woman who had been told she was too old, learning she was exactly the right age. The gala was held at a hotel ballroom in Midtown. 500 people. Donors in expensive suits writing checks to assuage guilt or tax burden, or both. Scholarship recipients in their best clothes. Some borrowed, some bought specifically for this night. Industry leaders who had adopted the Constellation model. Politicians who had supported the Restaurant Workers Protection Act that had passed 3 years ago. That act alone had transformed the industry. Required paid sick leave, mandated anti-discrimination training, created federal oversight of wage theft, established penalties severe enough that restaurant owners actually complied. It had taken 3 years of lobbying, hundreds of testimonies, thousands of letters, but it had passed, and it was saving lives. Elena wore a simple dress, black, elegant but not ostentatious. She had stopped trying to look younger years ago, let her hair go silver naturally, wore comfortable shoes that did not punish her feet, owned her age as an asset rather than apologizing for it as a liability. At 47, she looked like a woman who had lived fully, who bore the marks of experience with pride. Marcus was her date, her partner, her witness. He wore a tux and looked uncomfortable in it, kept pulling at the collar like it was strangling him. After all these years of being a billionaire, he still dressed like someone playing dress-up. She loved him more for his discomfort, for being powerful but never comfortable with power, for understanding that wealth was responsibility, not permission. The program included speeches from scholarship recipients, not just quick thank yous, but real stories. Women who had been 45 and 50 and 58 when they decided to pursue culinary careers, who had been told they were too old, who had found the foundation and discovered that too old was a lie society told to keep women small. One woman, Carmen Rodriguez, wife of Maria the porter, took the stage. She was 58 now, 5 years older than when Elena had first met her at that initial staff meeting. 5 years of transformation compressed into a 5-minute speech. I was invisible, Carmen said from the podium, her accent thick but her voice clear. For 30 years I cleaned houses, rich people houses, big houses. I cleaned the bathrooms, the kitchens, the bedrooms. Nobody see me. Nobody ask my name. I am just the cleaning lady. Nobody think I have dreams. Nobody think I have brain. She paused. The room was absolutely silent. Then my husband Maria, he work at Constellation. He come home one day, he say, the owner, she ask my name. She ask what I need. She see me. First time in 30 years someone with power see me. I think, maybe I matter. Maybe I'm not invisible. Carmen's voice broke. She took a moment, breathed, continued. I am 53 when I apply for scholarship. I am old. My hands hurt from cleaning, my knees hurt from kneeling, my back hurt from bending. I think maybe too old for school, maybe too broken for new dream. But I apply anyway. And the foundation, they say yes. They say you are not too old. You are valuable. You deserve investment. The audience was transfixed. I graduate culinary school at 55, top of my class. Now I have catering business. I employ 6 women, all over 50, all told before they are too old. We cook for our community. We make money. We have dignity. This because Elena Sterling say, invisible women matter. This because she prove it with money, with action, with belief. Carmen looked directly at Elena. You change my life, but more than that, you change my daughter life. She see her mama graduate college. She see her mama own business. She learned that age is not expiration date. That is legacy. That is revolution. The applause was thunderous. People standing, crying, moved by this woman's journey from invisible to essential. But Carmen was not finished. She raised her hand for quiet. I want to say one more thing. To all the young people here who give money, who write checks, who think they are helping old women, you are not helping us. You are investing in us. Big difference. Help is charity. Investment is respect. We pay you back, not with money, with excellence, with teaching next generation, with proving that experience has value. That is good investment. Thank you for seeing it. You. She walked off stage to another standing ovation. Elena felt tears on her face. This was why she had done it. Not the viral video or the media attention or the foundation named after her. This, Carmen's transformation. The ripple effect of one choice to see the invisible. Later during the reception, people approached Elena in waves, each one wanting to tell their story, each one wanting her to know that the foundation had mattered, that the constellation model had mattered, that standing still while caviar flew had mattered. A young woman, maybe 25, bright-eyed and eager, navigated through the crowd with the determination of someone on a mission. Mrs. Sterling, I am a business student at Wharton. I am writing my thesis on the constellation model, about how worker ownership and profitability are not opposing forces. Your restaurants prove it is possible. You changed what business schools teach about labor. Elena felt something shift in her chest. This was the real legacy, not just changing one restaurant or one industry. Changing what the next generation believed was possible. Changing the textbooks, the case studies, the fundamental assumptions about how businesses should operate. What will you do with your degree? Elena asked. Start a restaurant, a worker cooperative from day one, not as a retrofit but as the foundation, your model but in fast casual, making dignity accessible at every price point, not just fine dining. What is your name? Maya Patel. Maya, when you open your restaurant, call me. I want to invest. The young woman's eyes widened. Really? But you do not know anything about my business plan, my experience, my qualifications. I know you believe workers deserve dignity. I know you are willing to build a business model around that belief instead of despite it. I know you are 25 years old, which means you will make mistakes I can help you avoid. I know you have the kind of idealism that can actually change things if it is paired with practical support. That is enough. Call me. Maya was crying now. Thank you, I will make you proud. Make yourself proud. That is harder and more important. An older man approached next, 70-something, distinguished, the kind of presence that came from decades in positions of authority. Mrs. Sterling, I am Robert Chen, David's father. Elena went very still. David Chen, the manager she had fired 5 years ago, the man who had created the toxic culture, who had valued profit over people, who had screamed at her when she was assaulted. She had not thought about him in years. I came to apologize, Robert Chen said. For my son, for what he did, for the culture he created. I raised him to value success above everything, to see people as resources to be optimized. I taught him that caring about workers was weakness. I was wrong, and he paid the price for my teaching. Where is David now? Managing a hotel in Las Vegas, doing well financially, miserable personally. He has no relationships, no respect from his staff, just money and emptiness. I watch him and I see my mistake. I taught him to win without teaching him why winning matters. Robert Chen's voice was heavy with regret. I wanted you to know that what you did, going undercover, revealing the truth, it did not just change your restaurant. It changed my family. I talk to David every week now. Really talk. About values, about people, about what kind of man he wants to be. It is too late for him to work at Constellation. But maybe not too late for him to become someone better. Elena did not know what to say. She had not expected this. Forgiveness was easier to extend when people did not apologize, when you could hate them cleanly. But this man standing before her, owning his mistakes, trying to repair the damage through his son, that was more complicated. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "I hope David finds his way. I hope he learns that there is more to life than winning, that relationships matter, that how we treat people defines who we are more than what we achieve." I hope so too. And Mrs. Sterling, I made a donation tonight, a large one, not to assuage guilt, but to support what you are building. My generation failed. We built systems that crush people. Your generation is fixing it. That deserves investment. He shook her hand and disappeared into the crowd. Later, Marcus found her on the balcony, taking a break from the crowd. "You just offered to invest in a restaurant that does not exist yet, run by someone you just met." "Yes, that is not very businesslike." "Good. I am tired of business being the only logic that matters. Sometimes you invest because you believe in people, because you remember being young and hungry and needing someone to take a chance, because paying forward matters more than returns." Marcus kissed her temple. "You have become someone I did not know you could be." "Who is that?" "Someone who trusts, someone who lets go, someone who plants seeds without needing to control exactly how they grow." "I am still controlling, just differently, more subtly." "No, you are supporting. There is a difference." They stood together watching the city. The same city where 5 years ago everything had changed. Where a woman had thrown caviar and another woman had stood perfectly still. Where invisible had become unforgettable. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "The undercover operation, the public exposure, everything that came after." "Every day and never, both at the same time." "How's that possible?" "Because I am complicated. Because I contain multitudes. Because I can regret the pain and celebrate the outcome. I can wish it had been easier and know it needed to be this hard. I can be scared of what I started and proud of where it went. All of it is true." "That is very evolved of you. Or very confused. I cannot always tell the difference." The next day, Elena visited Victoria. She did this once a month, a standing appointment. Coffee at a small cafe in Brooklyn where Victoria now lived. Not the Park Avenue apartment she had lost. A modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood where artists and immigrants and people rebuilding their lives coexisted. Victoria was already there when Elena arrived. She looked different than she had 5 years ago. Softer. The hard edges worn away by years of therapy and amends and choosing differently. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her silver hair was cut short. No armor, no mask. Just a woman learning to be herself. "I finished the list," Victoria said after they had ordered. "I know, you called. But I want to tell you about the last one, about Lucia. Lucia Brennan, the chef Victoria had destroyed 10 years ago. The woman whose restaurant had closed because of a review so vicious, it became a case study in culinary school about the power critics held. I found her in Maine. She left New York after her restaurant closed, stopped cooking professionally, started teaching at a community college. She did not want to see me. I do not blame her. But I wrote her a letter, explained what I was doing, offered to make financial restitution. She wrote back." Victoria pulled out a folded paper, handed it to Elena. The letter was brief, written in neat cursive. "Victoria, I do not forgive you. I may never forgive you. What you did destroyed years of my life. But I acknowledge that you are trying to change. That matters. If you are serious about restitution, I am opening a new restaurant. Small, local. Nothing like what I had before. I need investors. If you want to make amends, invest. Not your money, your expertise. Teach me how to survive critics like you used to be. How to build something that cannot be destroyed by one person's opinion. That is how you make this right." Elena looked up. "Are you going to do it?" "I already am. I fly to Maine next week. I'm going to work with her for 3 months, consulting, teaching, making myself useful instead of destructive. I do not know if it will be enough, but it is what I can offer. That is good work, Victoria. It is terrifying work. What if I fail? What if I revert? What if I hurt her again? Then you will have to make amends again. That is the risk of redemption. It is not a one-time thing. It is a daily practice, forever. They sat in comfortable silence. 5 years ago, they had been enemies. Now they were something else. Not friends exactly, but witnesses to each other's transformation, partners in the long, slow work of becoming better. "How is your daughter?" Elena asked. Victoria's face lit up. "Grace is 3 now, starting preschool next week. She calls me Mama. Every time she says it, I think about Sophie. About how Sophie never got to be anyone's mother. And I am grateful and heartbroken at the same time. Both things can be true. Yes, I am learning that. That grief and joy can coexist. That you can miss someone terribly and still build a new life. That loving grace does not mean forgetting Sophie. That I can be a mother without erasing the mother I was before. That is wisdom. That is therapy, very expensive therapy." They laughed, real laughter, the kind that came from shared understanding. 5 years after the night everything changed. Constellation held its annual staff retreat. No longer just the original location, but all 3. 130 people total. Workers, owners, partners, in an experiment that had proven successful beyond anyone's expectations. The retreat was held at a conference center upstate. Not fancy, functional, with meeting rooms and dorms and a dining hall that reminded everyone of summer camp. The first session was led by Rachel, not a speech, but a conversation about where they had been, where they were going. 5 years ago, we were a single restaurant with a toxic culture, Rachel said. Today, we are 3 restaurants with a model that other businesses study. That did not happen by accident. It happened because every single person in this room made choices, daily choices, to be kind instead of cruel, to support instead of sabotage, to build instead of tear down. She paused. Let that settle. But we are not done. We have not fixed the industry. We have fixed 3 restaurants. There are thousands more where workers are still invisible, still abused, still told their age is a liability, and their needs are inconvenient. Our job is not to rest on what we have built. Our job is to share what we have learned. The room erupted in applause. Then the workshop sessions, led by different staff members. Margaret teaching about wine service and professional respect. James teaching about mental health and creating safe spaces. Sophia teaching about operations and efficiency without exploitation. Keisha teaching about kitchen culture and the difference between discipline and cruelty. And in one of the smaller rooms, Elena leading a session called When I Was Invisible. She told her story, the 3 weeks undercover, the things she had seen, the things she had learned, the moment when caviar flew and time stopped and she chose to stand still. 50 people crowded into a room meant for 30. They listened with the kind of attention that came from recognizing yourself in someone else's story. After she finished, a young server raised her hand. "Do you think what you did was worth it? The exposure, the criticism, the years of fighting. If you could go back, would you do it again?" Elena considered. "I think about that often. Whether I would choose differently if I knew how hard it would be. How much it would cost. Not financially, emotionally, relationally. How much of myself I would have to give." She paused. "And I still do not have a clear answer. Some days I think, yes, absolutely, it was worth every moment of pain because of what we built. Other days I think about the quiet life I could have had, the privacy, the peace, the ability to make mistakes without millions of people judging them. But you keep going." "I keep going because I made a promise to invisible women everywhere that they were not crazy, that the system was broken, not them, that standing up was possible. I cannot take that promise back just because it is hard to keep. So yes, I would do it again. Even knowing everything I know now, I would do it again." The room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone, standing, applauding, not for her, for themselves, for choosing to be part of this, for believing change was possible and then doing the work to make it real. That night, there was a bonfire. 130 people gathered around flames under stars. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought marshmallows. Children ran between adults, their laughter cutting through the darkness. Elena sat on a log between Marcus and Lily. Her daughter was almost asleep, head on Elena's shoulder, thumb in mouth. Marcus's arm was around both of them, warm, solid, present. Across the fire, Rachel sat with her daughters and her husband, her hand on her still flat belly. The new life growing there, a secret only a few people knew, a promise of continuation. Margaret and her husband were roasting marshmallows, arguing good-naturedly about the perfect level of char. 57 and 70 years old and still learning each other, still choosing each other, still finding new ways to be. Sophia was showing her parents around, introducing them to staff, translating between languages and generations. Her father's face showed pride, her mother's showed understanding. They were learning to see their daughter's work as valuable, to trust that she had chosen correctly even if she had chosen differently than they imagined. James sat slightly apart, Apollo at his feet, watching the fire with the kind of peace that came from hard-won stability. 5 years ago, he had been barely holding together. Now he was helping others hold together, turning his pain into purpose. Victoria was not there. She had been invited, but had declined. "This is for the people who did the daily work," she had said. "I am still earning the right to be part of that community." Wise, self-aware, choosing appropriate boundaries instead of demanding inclusion. Someone started singing, an old folk song about workers and dignity and the long road to justice. Others joined in. Not everyone knew all the words. It did not matter. The point was not perfection. The point was participation. Elena looked around the fire at all these faces. People who had trusted her even when she lied about who she was. People who had chosen to transform alongside her. People who had proven that change was possible when enough people decided it mattered. "Mama," Lily whispered, half asleep, "tell me the story." "Which story?" "The caviar story. The one where you stood still." Elena had told this story many times. To journalists, to students, to people who wanted to understand what courage looked like. But telling it to her daughter was different. This was legacy. This was teaching the next generation that standing up sometimes meant standing still, that dignity was worth fighting for, that invisible women could become unforgettable. "Once upon a time," Elena began, "there was a woman who owned a restaurant." She told the story simply. No embellishment, no drama, just the truth. A woman went undercover, learned hard things, stood still when violence came, chose grace over revenge, built something better with people who believed in better. Lily was asleep before the ending, but Marcus was listening, and the people around the fire were listening. And maybe that was the point. Not that everyone heard every word, but that the story kept being told, kept being passed down, kept reminding people that change was possible. Later, after Lily was tucked into bed in their cabin, Elena and Marcus walked down to the lake. The moon was full, reflecting on the water, turning everything silver. "What are you thinking about?" Marcus asked. "The future. What happens when we are gone? When this generation retires? Will what we built survive? Or will it slowly erode until it is just a story people tell about a time when things were briefly better?" "I think it will survive because you are not just building restaurants. You are building culture, training people, teaching them not just what to do, but why it matters. Culture outlasts individuals." "I hope you are right." "I am right. Watch. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people will still tell the story of the woman who stood still, the woman who chose grace, the woman who proved that invisible could become unforgettable, and they will build on what you started, make it better, make it theirs. That is legacy." They stood at the water's edge, two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other through everything. Through revolution and chaos and transformation and all the ordinary days in between. "Thank you," Elena said. "For what?" "For witnessing me, for not trying to save me, for understanding that love is standing beside someone while they figure out how to save themselves. Thank you for letting me, for trusting that I could be witness instead of savior. That was a gift." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more opportunities to choose kindness over cruelty, to choose building over destroying, to choose standing up even when it would be easier to sit down. But tonight they rested. In her sleep, Lily dreamed of pasta stars in restaurant kitchens where everyone was visible, where no one was too old or too young or too anything, where work honored workers and excellence included humanity. She was 3 years old. She would not remember this retreat, would not remember the fear or the singing or the story of the caviar. But she would grow up in a world shaped by these choices, would internalize the idea that women owned businesses and shared power and age with dignity, would never have to learn that she was invisible because she would always know she was seen. That was legacy too. 5 years after the night everything changed, the world was different. Not perfect, never perfect. Still broken in 10,000 ways, still cruel, still unjust, still tilted toward the powerful and away from the vulnerable. But also better, measurably better. Restaurants across the country had adopted elements of the Constellation model. Worker ownership was growing, age discrimination was declining. Women over 40 were starting businesses and careers and second acts and refusing to be invisible. The change was slow, so slow that some days it felt like nothing was happening. But slow change was still change. Incremental progress was still progress. Planting seeds and tending them, and trusting they would grow even when you could not see the growth yet. That was revolution. Not the dramatic moment when everything shifts, but the daily choice to keep building, keep trying, keep believing that better was possible and worth the work of making it real. Elena Sterling had stopped being invisible, had stood at the center of a moment that changed culture, had turned personal reckoning into collective transformation. But more importantly, she had helped others see their own visibility, their own worth, their own power to create change. The invisible women were becoming unforgettable. One restaurant, one policy, one choice at a time. And there was no going back from that.